Hi, everyone, members of the public. Welcome to the September 30th meeting of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee. I am the chair, Libby Hutton. We are just going to wait a few more minutes to see if we will reach quorum and if some of the members who are attending virtually to join.
I'm Odette Wilkins.
John Barrett.
Nice to meet you.
There should be a sign-in sheet.
There isn't one.
There isn't one. I can't be to sign in.
Yeah.
All right, we need the only
I
ones.
was asking you to sign in, but I don't see anything. Is this the agenda? Is there an agenda here?
The agenda should be online.
Oh, okay. These for distribution.
This is just for the committee members. But,
You can just take a look.
no, it's just for our internal
No, those are all
purposes.
draft materials.
It's all
Oh,
draft,
they're
it's not
material.
public.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Got the sign-in sheet right here.
Oh, great.
Mhm.
Excellent. Thank you.
The boards, John and Lisa. Please.
All right, this printer's weird.
Do you have a book of sign she thought that
We'll be taking attendance,
Okay.
virtually.
We're good. I'm trying to get the
Okay.
Post matrix. But it printed weird, so I'm just gonna print it.
You have to tell the print landscape.
Got it, that's that.
And he needs a little talking to.
I think the tracker is not working.
Not working?
Yeah, it's saying that we have quorum, but we do not have quorum.
I'll fix that.
Okay. Thanks. This is for our normal. We need 8 now, right? Or are we down to 7?
Oh, this is for the 2 activations.
It doesn't matter because you know we're close.
We're what?
You know we're close, so it doesn't.
We've got Catherine who's virtual and counts. And
Okay.
Todd should be virtual and count, but I don't know
Okay.
where he is.
I don't know, is Charles in your committee?
Yeah.
Okay, and. So if they're there, 1, 2, 3, you're still not close, you're still not there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, back 6. And then Todd, if Todd comes, then he'll be 7. So then we have quorum, but we don't know.
Would you wait on the voting items up until later, Kevin shows up?
I think this might be, John can do that.
No, you don't wanna leave OTI anymore.
Yeah, okay,
Against their city agency, then,
okay,
over time.
okay. All right, we are going to begin. We have not reached quorum. So all of our voting items tonight are going to be recommendations that will be sent to the executive committee. So this is a referral to the executive committee. And then the resolutions will be discussed there for referral to the full board meeting. Once again, I'm Libby Hutton. I am the chair. And we can go around and introduce ourselves.
Hello, Murnal Bikram.
Sean Harris.
And then if our members online could introduce themselves.
Todd Shapiro.
Charles Nye.
KJ.
Isabel Marks.
James Michael Southworth, and I apologize that I am not there in person.
I'm Beth Siebold with OTI.
Great. So on our agenda tonight, I'm just going to run through what our agenda looks like. We're going to hear a presentation about the 5G towers. Then we will go into discussion and ask any questions. Then we will hear public comment. And then we will, for no members of the public will then have a chance to speak afterwards, and we will then go into discussion and vote again for referral because we do not have quorum. Michael Southworth ran a lot of our due diligence on the 5G process. So we are relying, and a big thank you to him for all of his work. And members of the committee, you should have his drafts of several of his research and suggestions, and he will be able to lead some of this discussion. And with that, you can take it away on the presentation.
Wait, one moment. Did you take attendance and did you say we do or do not have quorum?
Do not have quorum, I said it. Yeah, we will not have quorum tonight.
Todd is here. Okay.
Oh, we might actually have quorum. Hold on just a second.
Hello.
Hello.
Libby,
Yes.
Nick, Zool, Layla. They're all there, not here. We should be there too. They're doing stuff about our stuff. There's a lady who does the,
We're in.
Oh, you started
We're in
already?
business session.
okay, never mind.
Yeah, we do not have quorum, so this is going to be just continuing from there. Okay, we are ready for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Libby, were you talking to me or were you talking to OTI?
OTI, sorry.
Great. And actually also Libby, if I get there, does that change quorum? Are we able to vote if I get there?
Let me double check on that. Hey, Josh, can you help me with our committee composition? Sorry for the delay. Our committee composition has recently changed a couple times. So I just want to double check what our new quorum number is.
Let me see. I just updated the
You want that.
formula, so it should be good.
There you go.
Yeah, if you came in person, then we would have quorum. And we'd be able to vote, but
Okay, well, I do want to hear what the OTI presentation.
okay,
so
yeah. Okay, let's
I'll leave
further,
after that, but I'm not.
let's not delay, and I want to be really respectful of everyone's time. So Beth, please take it away. And we are very eager to hear your presentation.
I think I'll jump in and get us started. My name is Brett Segoff. I am the Executive Director of Franchise Administration and Broadband with the New York City Office of Tech and Innovation, joined by my colleague you just mentioned, Beth Siebold. She's our External Affairs Manager. Before I turn it over to Rob Sokoto, who represents the franchisee CityBridge, I just want to give you a very, very brief introduction of the program and why we're here today. Number of years ago, probably 7, 8 years ago at this point, the city awarded a contract to a company named CityBridge to replace all the city's outdated, outmoded, derelict public pay telephones around the city. So all those payphones have since been removed and initially were started to be replaced with what was known as the Link NYC, the original kiosk that many of you all are familiar with, the about 9-10 feet in height, slim profile. That those were deployed largely in Manhattan, and the CityBridge team ran into some issues with the deployment. We quickly pivoted to something else that would make it a sustainable model and ensure that there's equity in terms of all the services that the Link NYC program offers, including the free Wi-Fi, the free calling, device charging, access to city services, 311, 911, and lots more. But in order to get them out throughout the city, and particularly into the outer boroughs, the program pivoted to include not just advertising as the sole source, as the source of revenue for the company, but also 5G services to be able to support the city's efforts to expand wireless access throughout New York City. So with that, they had to come up with a new design. So in addition to the smaller link, there's the 32-foot link that Rob will talk about in a moment. So all that is to say that the city is behind this program. We want to see it expanded. We want to see it to be built out equitably, but we also want this level of community engagement. We want to speak to you. We want to speak to the community boards. We want to speak to the elected officials, the borough presidents, the bids. As new sites are proposed, we want to make sure that they're going into places where they obviously meet a need from a telecommunications standpoint, but also are mindful of any particular concerns that communities have about particular locations. So we have this dialogue, we have this opportunity to propose sites, hear from you all, and then we can make informed decisions moving forward. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Rob Sakota, who represents CityBridge and Bolden. Rob?
Sure. Thank you, members of Manhattan Community Board 5 for having us tonight. My name is Rob Sakota. I'm the president for wireless at Link NYC, or as Brett said, the company is called CityBridge, but the name of the kiosks that we're deploying across the city is more well known as Link NYC. I'm going to, if I can, share a presentation with you. And let's see if this works. And if folks can tell me if they are able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Is that a yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Can you give some descriptions or graphics? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to go through Link NYC and an overview of the Link 5G program for a few minutes with a number of slides. And then we'll open it to questions. I'm sure there are many. What's the purpose of Link NYC? Is to provide a free and equitable access to connectivity, information, and wireless services. And how do we do that? Well, we, as Brett said, have deployed approximately 2,000 of the 9.5-foot kiosks that you see here on the right around New York City, as he mentioned, largely in lower and midtown Manhattan, but in all 5 boroughs. All of them provide free public Wi-Fi. That means that anyone can access the internet using their phone or any other device for free by signing up with Link NYC. And over the course of the program, I think now we've had over 16 million people sign up and access the free Wi-Fi services. In addition to that, the kiosks also provide a free nationwide calling. They were replacing the phone booths in some sense, but now you don't need a quarter. You can just make free phone calls from them. We've got 911, 311 access. We've got a tablet with sort of quick access to a number of social services. We have 2 advertising screens on the original Link, and we use those both to put paid advertising, but we also provide a significant amount of free advertising to the city, to community boards, nonprofits, local businesses. And we have a USB port for phone charging. As many of you know, there's a digital divide in New York City. There are some areas that are better connected than others. Manhattan 5 is no doubt an area which is probably better connected than many others throughout New York City. But there are millions of people in New York City who don't either have access at home or don't have broadband and rely on sources of internet access like the Link NYC kiosks. During the pandemic, we did a survey of our users, and approximately 1/3 of them indicated that their only access to the internet was through the Link NYC kiosk network. We're providing free internet access to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people each month. As Brett mentioned, initially the program was designed to essentially generate revenue through the sale of ads. This is not a program which costs New York City anything. In fact, we, the franchisee, have to pay New York City a franchise fee to be able to utilize the space that we're using on the sidewalks, which we understand to be quite valuable. We were also obligated to remove the more than 8,000 phone booths that existed throughout the city, which we completed a few years ago. Around 2020, 2021, we realized we needed to come up with an alternative or an additional revenue source for the program. So at that time, there were a number of the mobile telecommunications carriers who were looking for locations.
I'm sorry, I need to object here. You guys were audited by the state, and it was over $60 million that was unpaid. Also, you're presenting a form of this presentation that skips over numerous slides that don't actually show what your actual analysis of the digital divide in New York City is. I'm sorry, but give a fair dealing here.
Michael, we can ask additional questions after.
No, it's not. They don't have the right to just say this to us. This is wrong.
In terms of your question with respect,
Jessica Tisch wrote a letter to you guys almost threatening to pull your franchise license. What are you talking about?
Michael, we can ask as many questions, but let's let them finish their presentation.
You are correct that, as I mentioned, in 2020-21, the franchise had a number of financial problems, including the fact that it was at that point way behind on its payment of its franchise fees to the city. But at that time, we made some adjustments to the franchise agreement. We at that point got a new investor into the venture to bring in additional capital. We paid 25 out of the $60 million at that point. Subsequently to that, we have a payment schedule for the balance of the 60 million that we are up to date with, and I believe we paid an additional 10 million out of the 60. So we have still a back payment of $25 million that we have a payment schedule that we're paying back to the city between now and I believe 2030. We also have ongoing payments to the city for our annual use of the franchise moving forward that we pay in addition to the back payments.
Right, which was reduced to 3 million from.
Correct. So the franchise fees, you are correct, were reduced as part of that negotiation. And currently they are, I believe, 3 million per year. And when it gets above, our revenues get above 100 million, it kicks up to 8%. And then if our revenues get certain other thresholds, the percentage of the payment going to the city increases.
Right, but the original franchise agreement said 25%.
Michael, we're gonna let them finish, and then you can ask all of the questions at the end so that we're all gonna be like on the same page as with each.
Chair.
No cross.
Let them use their time to lie to us.
You can take that up during.
Then it's out of order. Then their presentation is out of order and they can go somewhere else.
When the committee when the committee is able to ask them questions, that's when we can ask them questions.
I'm not asking a question, I'm stating fact.
Well, during our question period, that is when, please hold your questions until the question period.
Okay, but it's a
Thank you.
point of order and that they cannot continue to state falsehoods. So whoever is presenting from whatever organization you are from, please try to contain yourself to the truth.
I certainly will do that. Thank you. So in 2021, we, as I said, looked to revamp the franchise with a new structure. And we looked for a structure that was going to be consistent with the at least look and feel of the older 9.5-foot kiosk. And we developed the new structure, which is called the Link 5G. It is significantly taller than the prior structure. It is 32 feet in height, approximately the same site as the light poles here in New York City, but still provides all of the same services as the original kiosk in terms of the free phone calling, free Wi-Fi, digital screens, and tablet. And you may ask, okay, well, why does it look like this? And there's been an evolution of cellular infrastructure here in New York City. I'm actually going to skip over one more slide. So, 30 years or so ago, as cellular communications began to become popular in the United States, most cellular communications was provided from towers that look something like the tower on the left. These are called macro towers. They're very large, have very large radios, which will go very significant distances. And this was sort of the initial way that cellular communications were provided. Now, you'll still see towers like this on the highways, so it maybe in New Jersey or out on Long Island, but you don't really see this type of infrastructure on the left here in New York City, given its size. The next generation, as people began to use cellular communications more and more, it was found that just providing services from these large single towers wasn't going to be sufficient. So the cellular carriers began providing additional coverage, largely from rooftops in areas like New York, which is a dense urban environment, using rooftop antennas that look somewhat like what we have here on the right. I'm sure you've all seen these on roofs across the city. This was sort of the next generation to provide additional coverage. Why did they need to provide additional coverage? Because, as everyone knows, original cell phones essentially were good for telephone calls. Next generation of cell phones got into texting, looking at the web. When you got up to the last generation before the existing one, 4G, you got into streaming of videos and other higher capacity cellular communications usage, and therefore additional infrastructure was necessary to provide that. Each year, cellular capacity, or the amount of data used, increases typically 20 to 30%. So the large cellular providers are always looking for additional ways where they can ensure that they can continue to provide good service to their customers. I'm going to go back one slide. And the next generation is sort of the view of what you have here on the left. Several years ago in New York City, the city made available the use of the city light poles for cellular communications use and the placement of cellular radios. And when this was done at the 4G level, it looked like this light pole over here on the left with the box in the middle. But instead of the large cylinder at the top, you might have just had like a stick antenna. And if you look up and you're walking down the street in the city, you will see these. There are several thousand of them deployed. However, when 4G started moving to 5G cellular communications, the light pole as it was and the stick antenna didn't really provide the necessary space for certain 5G services. So the city developed this new 5G structure together with the telecommunications carriers and the Department of Transportation to be able to house 5G cellular communications. So there are still, you don't want to see a lot of them yet because they only started getting introduced maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But there you will see a few of these in Manhattan and some of the other boroughs. On the right, you see the Link 5G. That's what we're here to talk about today. It was developed with the thought that unlike the light pole, it would be beneficial for providing communications to have a custom-built structure, purpose-built structure, which in addition to providing all of the services for the public, the free public services that I mentioned earlier, was a custom built in order to provide the highest quality cellular services. Unlike the pole on the left, the pole on the right, the Link 5G, has much more capacity for the containment and housing of cellular radios, meaning that in addition to the free Wi-Fi, we can probably put 3 or 4 times as much cellular communications equipment in the Link 5G as you could on this pole top on the left, meaning that you need fewer installations as cellular communications demands grow. I'm going to skip forward. How is Link 5G different? As I mentioned before, this is a purpose-built wireless telecommunications infrastructure. Again, the idea here is instead of putting cellular communications on every light pole in the city, which is highly disruptive because the light poles, while you might think, hey, the light pole is already there, it's not disruptive to put something on the top of the light pole. In fact, light poles, as I said, were not really built to hold cellular communications. So when they're used for 5G services, essentially the provider needs to rip the pole out of the ground, replace the foundation, and either reinforce the existing pole or put a new pole in. Because the light poles are not connected to the fiber optic network, which is important for cellular communications, you also need to rip up the street to dig a trench between that light pole and a, say, Verizon manhole, which is quite disruptive. Similarly, in the outer boroughs, you need to do the same thing with utility poles. Yes, we do that also with the Link 5G, but the idea is because it can house more equipment, we should be ripping up the street significantly less than using just the light poles. But there are a number of restrictions where we can and can't put the Link 5G or what we can do. We are not allowed to put the advertising screen for the Link 5G in residential zones. Only screenless versions are allowed there. We can't have more than 1 Link 5G on a block, and they need to be at least 200 feet away from each other. And there are sort of numerous additional approvals in addition to Office of Technology and Innovation that we need before we can deploy. In some instances, if we're near a park, we need the approval of the Parks Department. If we're in a historic district as designated by the New York City Landmark Preservation Commission, we must go before the Landmark Preservation Commission. And every single site we deploy needs to go through what's called a Section 106 review, which is a review for historic impact on historic sites conducted by the New York State Historical Preservation Office. I'm not going to read through this, but this is another list of siting criteria, essentially, how far away we need to be from various pieces of street furniture, and to ensure that we have at least 8 feet of clear path on the sidewalk, so we're not crowding the sidewalk. In terms of the specific sites for Manhattan 5, I have a couple of maps just to give you some highlights, and then we'll look at individual photos of the locations of the individual sites. This is the northern portion of Manhattan Community Board 5. We have 2 sites here proposed on or just off of 58th Street. In the middle of the community district, we have an additional, I believe, 7 sites. 3 of them on the west off of, I believe that's 6th Avenue, 1 on 5th Avenue, 2 off of Madison, and then 1 over on Lexington. And then lastly, further south, we have 1 on the corner of 29th and 6th Avenue. Now, these are all proposed sites. It's here. So these are the sites that would have been, that are listed on the letter that was sent to the community board by OTI. The letter was also sent to the borough president, to the relevant council members from the New York City Council. And where a site is in a business improvement district, the notice letter was also sent to that business improvement district. All of those parties are, invited to comment on the sites to us. So going through each of the individual sites, this is the first one. It is located in front of 1133 6th Avenue. It's actually in front of the Steinway and Sons piano store. And set back from the piano store is a 1133 6th Avenue. The building itself is a large office building. Second site is at 360 Lexington. Now, this is on the, I guess, the northwest corner of 40th Street and Lexington. There is an existing Link 1.0 at that site. You can see it here in the photograph. That would be replaced by the Link 5G if this site were to go forward. Now, we have filed with all of these sites through the State Historical Preservation Office process that I mentioned earlier. This site in particular, we've gotten some, I would say, negative feedback from the State Historical Preservation Office and their views that it may impact certain historical sites that were in view of where the kiosk would go. So, it's unclear exactly whether this site will or won't be able to move forward as a result of that. Next site is 106 West 45th Street. This is on the southwest corner of 45th and 6th Avenue. It's in front of an office building with the first floor of which I think used to be a TD Bank branch. Went by it this weekend, and the branch appears to be closed at this point and the space vacant, but presumably it will be occupied again by another retail client. Next site is 1100 6th Avenue. Now, this site is across 6th Avenue from it's actually in front of a Bank of America branch, but across the street from the Bank of America building and the Salesforce building. And I think this one is actually just north of Bryant Park. Next site is 1419 6th Avenue. This one is in front of a pharmacy. And to the right is, I think, a Trump Park Hotel. And this site is about a block south of Central Park. Next site, as you can see, is also on a replacement of an existing Link 1.0. This is the site in the furthest the furthest south in Manhattan 6 that we're proposing a site. It's at 831 6th Avenue. It's in front of a sort of a takeout food location, a souvenir clothing store. Next site is 366 Madison Avenue. This is on the southwest corner of 46th and Madison. It's in front of the proposed site is in front of the Joseph A. Banks clothing establishment. And this site is across the street from the Roosevelt Hotel. Next site is 480 Park. This is the southwest corner of 58th and Park. It's in front of I guess a jewelry china shop, James Robinson, and across from a linen store just off of Park Avenue. This one I think is just located on the street side so that it's not on the Park Avenue side. Next site is 355 Madison. This is 355 Madison, as you may know, is I think a recently renovated large office / meeting space structure, and it would be right in front of that building. And then lastly is 445 Fifth Avenue. This is the northeast corner of 39th and Park. It's in front of this design studio and across from a Staples, but it's essentially a block away, a block south of the New York Public Library. And that is all of the sites I wanted to show you and concludes the presentation. And with that, I will turn it back to the committee to take the discussion anywhere they'd like to go.
Thank you for that presentation. I guess my other question is there anything else that you would like the committee to know, maybe from OTI, about what benefits this provides to the city and sort of the city's thinking behind that?
Sure, I can touch on that. From the city's perspective, as I mentioned at the outset, we sought to take something that was unused and obviously decades old in terms of the public pay telephones, transform it into something new, modern, something that the public would want. Not just want, but also in this day and age, in this modern world we live in, frankly need, and not acknowledging that not everybody has unlimited minutes, unlimited data on their devices. People traverse the city and expect to be able to connect wherever they are. So a lot of folks ask, given that we have this equity slant in our franchise and the public communication structures franchise, which Link NYC is, we also have it in all of our franchises. So our mobile telecommunications franchise requires companies, when they build out, as Rob mentioned, light poles, when they put these antennas and these backpack size equipment shrouds on the light poles, they do so not just building and overbuilding in Manhattan, even though we're talking about Manhattan today, but they also build out in those outer boroughs so that where folks are, if they don't want to pay for home internet, or they, frankly, it's unaffordable in many cases. Everybody has a cell phone these days, but studies have shown that the majority of people who are connected to the internet in some of these lower income areas do it through their phones. So that really requires us to make sure we have a robust mobile telecommunications network throughout the city at all corners. So while we're certainly focused on those outer boroughs, and given that this franchise has a requirement that 90% of new Link 5G structures go in those outer boroughs, which is above 96th Street in the outer boroughs of Manhattan, there will be, as evidenced by today, some number that are built out, a significantly lower number and percentage that are built out in the core of Manhattan. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, it's obviously a priority for the city to make sure we have the best telecommunications network. Franchise does not cost the city a dime, doesn't cost the city a dime. Taxpayers, users of it, do not pay anything. It's being built out and funded solely by a private partner, in this case, CityBridge. They pay to install it, they pay to maintain it, and they even pay revenue to the city as a result of it. The other thing I would touch on too is there's been a good bit of I don't know if the best way to misinformation that's been spread over the years relative to this program and just telecommunications, mobile telecommunications in general, about the health effects from the radio frequency health effects from these types of devices. It's important to note that the Link 5G itself, aside from the Wi-Fi, which is built into every structure, the Link 5G itself is just the top portion. While maybe imposing and look pretty significant, it's really just an equipment cabinet at the very top, and it stores space. It houses telecommunications equipment for all the carriers: AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile.
Did you speak up? Sorry, we
Yeah.
just had.
Having a noise issue in person.
Yeah, of course. I'm sorry. So in terms of the structures themselves, they don't just by itself emit radio frequency waves. What they do is provide a space for telecommunications providers to put their radio equipment. Sorry, you guys, I don't know if you guys are hearing me well. Apologize.
It's a little hard to hear in the room still, sorry.
No worries. I'll sum up quickly. So
Yeah.
what I say that to say that there's been a lot of misinformation spread about the effects of telecommunications, of radio equipment supporting mobile telecommunications. Studies show that they are safe using the the standards that have been set forth by the federal government. The city has no authority in terms of enforcing requirements beyond what the federal government sets. So the federal government says what's safe. The city has provisions in its franchise agreement to require that City Bridge and all of its telecommunications franchisees comply with those federal requirements. We even go so far as to require periodic testing to ensure that those standards are followed. So an independent contractor is hired, they go out and will conduct an independent test, go back to a lab, analyze it, and make sure it does comply. We're likely to hear from some folks today and in the subsequent days about studies that purportedly say otherwise to that. But until or unless those studies are accepted by the larger regulatory body community who has oversight in the space, the city has no choice but to accept the fact that these telecommunications equipment, which are being installed not just in New York City, but around the country and indeed around the world, are in fact safe for being so close to where you and I all live. So I'll stop there and of course take any questions if you have any.
Okay, I just had one more question before we go into a different questions from the committee. I was wondering, as far as, sorry about the technology element if you really went over this, but as far as, it's my understanding that these networks all needed to physically be within visual distance of each other in order to work due to some sort of physical requirement, that they had to be close together or they would have connectivity, which would indicate that there must be some larger plan for all of them and where they're all going to go. So I was wondering if there was a larger plan and why we would not have access to that larger plan in advance. Why, if there's a larger planning system for all of it, if there isn't sort of an overarching guiding plan for where these would hopefully go that you will be applying for in the future. Because if there's a requirement, they all need to be connected to each other within a physical close proximity.
Rob,
Yeah, I'll take that. No, the sites don't need to be any specific physical proximity to each other. If the sites were, say, I don't know, 1,000 feet away from each other, then, if you were walking down the street and using the Wi-Fi from one site, you might be able to seamlessly transition to the next site using the Wi-Fi, but that's not a requirement of the of where they're placed. Most of the Wi-Fi is provided sort of on an island by itself. In terms of how it fits into the larger cellular networks, the idea would be that these sites would supplement the cellular communications that's currently being provided by the rooftop installations that I showed you previously and some of the pole top installations. For each of the cellular carriers, for example, this might fit into a network that they have, which is, as I said, made up of many different elements. But there's no requirement for the Link 5Gs to be in any specific pattern next to each other. And the sites we are showing you constitute all of the sites that are proposed for Community Board 10. It's not, we don't have any others that we're sort of holding in our pocket to show you later.
Can I ask a technical question? This is Todd Shapiro. So your selection of the sites in our district.
Hey, Todd.
Yep.
We're going to run through a couple more questions. I wanted to let Michael lead on this because he was running point.
Okay, go ahead. I'll wait my turn.
I'm actually curious to hear other people's questions first because I know where my direction is going. So
okay.
Let Todd ask first.
Todd, and then I'm going to go to people in the room.
Can you put up the map with the locations, please? In our district?
Sure.
No, actually, I would appreciate, don't put up their map. Please put up an actual map.
Okay, so thank you, Michael. So my questions are as follows. So looking back on the correspondence from our community board and from our elected officials bearing on the issue of the 5G towers, the issue is the participation of the wider public and all the different interests in the neighborhood that are affected by the siting of these transmitters and receivers. So my question is, on a technical level, is your choice of placement, is it dictated by, you mentioned already that it's not dictated particularly that they be placed such that they're right next to each other or line of sight or some other criteria. You know, in layman's terms, just what is the criterion that you use for the placement? The second, a related question is, if there was feedback from all of our community stakeholders that you had to move these things, maybe a block, maybe a couple of blocks, you know, what is the impact on the effective functioning of your 5G network? And then the third thing is, you know, my understanding of these things, I've done a little bit of reading, is the placement of these things is the area, the geographic area with the buildings and the power and all of the structures does it create interference such that you're limited in where you place these things, right? So can you give us some insight in that, on those issues and how they interrelate?
Sure, I can handle that. So there's a whole bunch of different factors into where these things are placed in terms of the macro factors that Brett talked about, that you know, we have a certain obligation to put a certain number of sites outside of Manhattan or above 96th Street. And then there are a bunch of smaller siting issues that I tried to show a couple of slides where there are a very large number of rules about where we can and can't place them relative to other pieces of street furniture or trees or things like that. But I think your question really gets to, okay, but understanding all of that, how did these locations get chosen? And within those parameters, these particular locations were chosen largely driven by one of the cellular carriers who is interested in improving its coverage in Midtown Manhattan. And we looked both at what they needed from a cellular coverage perspective, at the same time trying to understand all of those rules I just mentioned, and the fact that Manhattan is covered by a very large number of historical monuments, individual sites, historical districts, and the State Historical Preservation Office is very careful in where they let us put these or don't put these. So we try to plan around that as we choose the individual sites. You mentioned what happens if we need to move. There have been numerous instances we've gone to the community board and people bring up issues, and we wind up moving the site a few feet this way, a few feet that way, you know, a half a block this way, a half a block that way. Often moves of, you know, not that large a distance, you know, work, assuming that we can factor in all these other rules that we have to abide by. The site would generally still provide the same sort of service to the mobile carrier. Now, if someone said, you know, we don't want it here, go 10 blocks away, that doesn't really work to serve the same purposes, because the coverage from a site 10 blocks away would be very, very different from where the original site was. So I would say that, you know, we try to work with communities to make changes that fit within both the rules we have to abide by and the cellular coverage, but generally that means that the moves can't be of too great a distance.
Okay.
And then your last question was about interference, which I'm not quite sure I sort of understood.
So the placement, 5G, is my understanding of it, it's limited to a certain degree by range. So the placement of the 10, 11, or 12 in our district have to be spaced out so that they provide the maximal coverage, you know, given the distance and the range of 5G. So, okay, so you pretty much answered my question. So the answer is, if our stakeholders said they wanted to move it to another block, in terms of the impact on the overall grid and placement, that's not so good. If they just want to move it, 10, 12 feet, that's not going to be a killer in terms of the efficiency of the overall network. And correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the major factors in dictating your placement are more legal, landmark, and city rules than they are technical rules, other than just positioning them at the right distance to get the optimal coverage and signal strength. Is that right?
But obviously, both, as I said, if we're trying to cover a certain area, we're generally looking in that area and trying to figure out whether we can go in that area, given all of the rules that exist.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, Charles?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to quickly establish something before I ask my questions. So the presenter is from the company. Was there someone else from the city, or is it just this main person?
So yeah, I'm Brett Sykoff. I represent the city of New York, the Office of
perfect.
Innovation, and my colleague Beth Siebold is on the line as well.
Oh, good. So I'm going to ask one question for Brad, and then for the presenter. Sorry, I forgot your name. I apologize.
No problem.
So question for Brad is the city aware of NYC Mesh, New York City Mesh, which is a community founded internet provider, which uses they use line of sight routers, but they're quite connected in the borough of Brooklyn, and they're into free internet for everyone. That's no collection of data, decentralized, and their whole ethos is to help the community. They're a 501c3, and they use rooftops in the city for their routers to connect with each other. I'm just wondering if you guys were aware of that 501c3 organization, and if you guys would support something like that compared to this commercial venture, or maybe even help fund that. And then my next question, after Brad answers that, I have another question for the presenter, which is I live in a building with people who are on welfare, 410 apartments, and there's also on my block a homeless shelter, and we can't get this free Wi-Fi that you're offering. And you said about people having affordability issues getting internet, but we don't benefit from that. And in fact, only one side of the building, if you stand on the sidewalk, can you get linked up into the network. No one can get it in their actual units. So I'm just wondering about how how we can solve that issue, because there's plenty of my fellow tenants who don't have the resources to have internet because they just don't have the funds. And I'm just thinking, especially with my block in particular, with my building in particular and the shelter, I think they would benefit a lot. Since you also said the Wi-Fi systems have like information about social services and things like that. And my other question was accessibility. When you're out on the street at these locations, do they have, does the screen give out audio feedback? Could a blind person stick their headphones in and be able to operate that, or even make a phone call? And then my last question, thank you for your patience, is why do you have to have an email to be able to access the network when places like Madison Square Park that gives free Wi-Fi, or the Flatiron District, they don't even ask you for an email to sign up? So I don't understand what that's about, or how that's connected, or why that's so necessary when other places don't require an email. You can just basically click connect and you're there. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And I'll just quickly address some of the policy questions and turn it over to Rob for some of the technical. So in terms of NYC Mesh, absolutely. We've been in touch with them for many years. We've had a relationship about programs that the city may either help fund or help support by leveraging city infrastructure. So there was one case where we gave them access to New York City Housing Authority buildings to allow them to run their equipment to support their network to NYCHA residents. And even with the Link 5G or pole tops, we've been in discussions with them about utilizing the links to expand their fixed wireless network. So we're big fans of NYC Mesh and companies of that ilk, specifically NYC Mesh, which, as I think you mentioned, provides service at no cost to users. It's very community-led initiative. So we're supportive of them, and we'll continue to find ways to expand their presence in the city. Your next point about affordability and services that the city's offering, this doesn't really touch on it, so I don't mean to kind of dance around the question, but I think it's worth noting that the city, this administration in particular, started what's known as the Big Apple Connect program, which provides high-speed internet to, I'm sorry?
Oh, no, continue.
This administration is under federal indictment.
So this administration has provided high-speed internet to over 121,000 households, 121,000 households living in NYCHA. Folks who are obviously, in many cases, on public assistance, below the poverty line. Something near and dear, frankly, to my heart. I, having grown up in public housing myself and baby projects in Canarsie, understood, how people can use the advantage and the assistance month to month to make sure they get connected, which is something in light of COVID is essential these days. We saw just how important it was for kids to stay connected, to do remote work, for older adults to do telemed appointments, stay in touch with families, folks to find jobs. So this administration made it a priority in the early months of the administration in 2022 to make sure that folks, 121,000 households are connected. That's in addition to the free Wi-Fi that's provided to city homeless shelters, family shelters, and domestic violence shelters to make sure kids who are residing there, unfortunately, are connected to the internet, and a number of other programs that we have in place. So the Link 5G can help expand access to public Wi-Fi, doesn't necessarily provide coverage in unit, like in building coverage. It's more of a on-street amenity that it offers. But what it also offers, part of the 5G at the very top, is for those who don't want to pay for wired home internet or can't pay for wired home internet. As 5G is expanded throughout the city, and it is prevalent in the city. Obviously, if many of you all look at your phones, I have 5G right now. The 5G, the Link 5G can help, augment where there's need for additional capacity in certain areas where it's overloaded or there's a huge demand for data in particular areas. So for those who don't pay for, Verizon Fios or Altice or Spectrum to get their home internet, having a 5G wireless network, whether it's the fixed wireless or other means, is really essential in many cases. Rob, do you want to speak to the Wi-Fi connectivity, the need for the emails?
Sure, but I will also give a plug for NYC Mesh. They do great work, and we're interested in figuring out how to assist them, because you're right. While we're primarily focused on outdoor free Wi-Fi, in some cases you can get our Wi-Fi indoor, but it's frankly designed for outdoor services. There are other organizations like NYC Mesh that are focused on providing indoor free Wi-Fi, and we try to work with them where we can. In terms of, you had a question about the ability to use the kiosk if you're either hearing impaired or sight impaired. We do comply with, we've made all of the kiosks ADA accessible. So there is a video relay service for the deaf and hard of hearing. There's a hearing loop and controls marked with Braille. So we do what we can to ensure that those individuals who might have a certain difficulty with respect to seeing or hearing can make use of the service where possible. In terms of your question about the email, you are correct. When you initially sign up with the service, we ask that you provide an email. We use the email essentially to update the user about any changes in the terms and conditions that we need to make. Sometimes there might be a term and condition that maybe we're required to disclose to people, so we want to be able to communicate with them. We also use it for periodically to do surveys like the one I mentioned earlier. But that is few and far between. I think the survey we did during the pandemic was the last one we did. So you won't hear from us very often. And the reality is the email doesn't have to be a real email. You can put in a fake email as long as it follows a email syntax. The system will accept it. And the idea is, like I said, we want to make sure we can communicate with the users in the future.
Okay, I gotta jump in because there are a bunch of things.
There's some reason that we can't see the map that these people brought that was up for 1 second that you said, no, we gotta have this map. This map does
Okay.
not show
Mike,
anything.
Mike, okay.
Is there a reason that we can't see the map?
Hey, Robert, if you want to put that map back up so we can see the entire system of all of them together, that would be really
In our
helpful.
district, I don't care about the other district.
Sure, I can do that.
Michael, I provided maps in my document for you guys.
The map I got doesn't show what he showed. I want to see where they're positioned.
Okay. All right, so I tried to, because if I put all the sites on one piece of paper or one
Oh,
slide.
it's not that
to
hard.
see.
Just go to the wide shot of Community Board 5 from the park down.
You had it before, you had it up there.
Okay, so this is the first slide showing the two sites on.
Look, this is
58.
deranged.
That's right. It's so hard to look
Okay,
at that.
so here is the second slide. It shows the 7 sites that are located in the central portion of Manhattan 5. Is this the slide you were looking for?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Kabak, in the documents I provided a screenshot of exactly where they were.
Is it that big? Is it that nice? Can I look at this? Is it?
Yeah, it's actually, it's nicer than that because it shows the ones that are up on 57th Street and 59th Street, and it shows all the way down to Union Square at the same time. It's one image that shows everything. Because I thought you would want to see it.
This one? This tiny little map? I can't even see it. Why can't I see that? Would it be okay if he leaves it up,
Well,
please?
I can't see what he's waving, but the PDF I provided has
That's what I'm
all of
waiting.
their documentation. It also shows every single antenna that's within the entire district on a separate map.
Link 5G current and currently proposed. Yes, that little map, it's about 2 inches by 3. This map here on the screen is quite large and I can see it. I cannot see this.
Well, if
I
it
don't know.
were on the screen, it would be the same size.
What's wrong with that?
Okay, let's stop with the crosstalk, guys. We are working on getting a slightly larger map, but this gives you the connection between some of them on the screen.
Thank you. Who's talking? Does nobody have anything to say? I have a question.
No,
Okay.
I have questions. And I need to,
Let's let K-Back ask first, if that's okay.
Okay.
sure.
If I may, and thank you for your presentation. The time that it took between 4G and 5G was a year, 2, 3, 5 years. That was pretty quick for a new technology like 4G to come on scene. But at the rate of improvement of technology over the years, I'm seeing 6G coming out pretty soon, and then 7 and 8, and who knows how many more Gs. These poles, how high they are, 32 feet high, these towers, to me, seem that their time on Earth is going to be limited because of technology. Have you folks addressed something like what can be done when the next stage is reached, because it will?
Yes, in fact, we have. Typically there's no fixed time frame between the change in generations of phones. 1G was probably in call it the 80s and 2G in the 90s. So I would say roughly there's 10 years between the generations. But also between the generations, it doesn't mean the other one goes away. So while 5G has started across the country, most of the service you're probably getting today on a day-to-day basis is and will continue to be for many years to come the 4G service. So yes, there'll be 6G, but at that point, maybe 4G will go away, 5G will stay. But your question's a good one, which is, look, what have you done to make sure that we're not putting something up on the streets which becomes useless as technology changes? And the answer to that is, Brett mentioned earlier, that the services we're providing here in terms of the Link 5G is really like a container, right? That is, we've made a container where mobile carriers and others can place their equipment inside of that. And the things that they need most when they take a space is they need power, which we've connected all of the kiosks to the Con Ed grid system, so there's power available. And they need a service, they need a fiber optic cable, so that when you make a phone call and it goes into the radio on the pole, they can take it and send it through the fiber optic cable back to their system so you can communicate. So the three things that you really need to provide everyone is space, power, and fiber connectivity. Between the generations, the power doesn't change that much. The fiber connectivity doesn't change. Really, the one thing that changes is the space. And as I showed earlier, the 5G does take up, in some cases, more space than 4G did. But we made a large structure. In fact, many think too large a structure. And the reality is we've done so in part to avoid potential issues of obsolescence. If radios get bigger, we want to make sure that the structure is still useful. That, to me, would be the single largest potential reason. But again, I don't foresee that, certainly not in any reasonable period of time, that the structure would become obsolete.
Thank you.
John Harris.
Yes, a couple of questions. Well, let me make just tell me whether my statement is correct or not. This is primarily being driven by affordability outside of people's residences when they're moving around the city. Is that correct?
The Wi-Fi itself, I mentioned earlier, is largely an outdoor system. The cellular service that could be installed by cellular companies putting radios into the structures, that would be both outdoor, and potentially indoor as well.
Okay. And what's the radius for any given tower? In other words, how far from any given tower can it provide service?
The Wi-Fi, again, the only service that we're putting in to start, goes a few hundred feet, depending upon whether you're line of sight or not. The distance from any cellular service is largely going to be dependent on what type of equipment the cellular carrier places in the Link 5G. Now, certainly in general, the types of equipment they're going to use here is probably going to be smaller and go slightly smaller distance, certainly than those big macro towers I showed you before, and in many instances, even some of those rooftop cases. But I'd say on the shorter end, carriers might use frequencies that will provide a lot of capacity. That is, they'll take up a large amount of information, and those signals might go only a few hundred feet, maybe 500 feet. On the other hand, they could use other radios and other frequencies that will go several thousand feet. Typically, they don't have the same capacity. So there's a trade-off from the carriers. Are they trying to go far and provide a wider coverage? Or are they trying to go not so far, but yet get more users within the area they are? The carriers will, depending upon what their particular need is in a particular area, might use different types of equipment.
Okay. The furthest tower, you told us you know, the furthest one is downtown. Can you give me the cross street? And then, first of all, what's a cross street? And then, I'll follow up. Well, tell me the cross street first, and then maybe I have a follow-up question.
I believe it is located on the southwest corner of 6th Avenue and 29th Street. I've sort of moved to that map.
So then my follow-up question is, why no service between 29th and 14th Street, which is the remainder of the CV5?
The reason is, I said, these sites themselves are going to be only small pieces of a larger network that a cellular carrier might use. So a cellular carrier is going to use these sites to fill in gaps or that they have now, or gaps they perceive they're going to have because cellular communications increases, as I said, 20 to 30%. The spaces all in between here and the spaces throughout the city where we will never have Link 5Gs, in those cases, those carriers would need to depend on either those rooftop radios that I showed you before, or to other pole top radios.
So maybe I'm not understanding. So what's the rationale for not going below? Why not anything between 14th and the high 20s? Again, I mean, I understand.
I think in what is likely to be the explanation of that question is the coverage in between those two areas for the cellular carrier. The need isn't as great as it is in the areas they picked. That is, they're getting service today, probably from rooftop and other pole top installations in between 29th Street and the next site north. So they don't have as great a need to put an additional radio in between there today.
Okay. So I guess, is it fair then to say that current coverage is better between 14th and 29
for that one provider?
Yeah.
If I'm correct in my understanding, the need for that one provider who's your client, you don't need coverage in that particular area.
I'd have to say, I don't know whether they don't have a need for coverage, or it could have been we tried to look for a site in between, and given all the rules we need to follow, we were unable to find a location for them using the Link 5G, and maybe there's some other solution. But it's one of those two answers, which is they either don't need the coverage as much, or the rules prevent us from finding a good location in between those two areas.
Okay.
Myrna.
Yeah. So I actually want to go back to something that Robert said earlier, which was that all of this, the placement of the towers was because one particular cellular provider wanted to increase their coverage in Manhattan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The driving force is their need, that one particular cellular provider?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Is the driving force behind the location of the towers the need for that one cellular provider who's your client who wanted to better their coverage within Manhattan?
That is correct. Within the context of the rules and other things I mentioned, that was the driving force for these particular sites.
Is it fair to say that there are other providers out there who are doing just fine without these towers out there?
There are other providers who have other needs. And as time goes on, there are going to be those providers their needs are going to change as demand grows. And as I mentioned earlier, the benefit of this structure versus, say, a pole top structure is that for a second or a third or a fourth carrier to utilize the structure, we don't need to basically rip a pole out of the street. We don't need to rip up the street to connect the pole to power and to fiber. As additional carriers have needs in these areas, we'll be able to satisfy those needs with significantly less disruption to New Yorkers.
So multiple providers might have access to these poles.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not exclusive to that one provider.
Yeah.
So the second thing I want to understand is what exactly is the city getting out of this? So, I mean, a lot of the things that were mentioned in terms of access to internet, that's there through Link NYC right now. Obviously, it improves 5G coverage across the city, but people are paying for that, right? So is the city getting additional revenue from these 32 feet poles going up?
The city both gets revenue from us. The city also gets revenue anytime anyone puts a radio on a pole, whether it's a Link 5G pole or a pole top solution. But what else does the city get out of it? I think the city can speak for themselves, but they have a vested interest in ensuring that New York stays in the forefront of having the best mobile communication services. But in particular, what makes this franchise different from people who put radios on pole tops or people who put radios on rooftops, the other ways that people get cellular coverage, is we're providing these additional free services that these other structures do not provide. So we're providing free Wi-Fi, as I mentioned before, to hundreds of thousands of people every month.
But the 10-foot things already do that, and you already have those all over Manhattan. So why would we want to do 32-foot towers? What change, what new benefit are you doing?
Is this, I mean, one thing could be, is this provider going to provide discounted or free 5G service to people who can't afford it? I mean, 5G is no longer just, cell phones, right? I mean, you could get 5G internet in your home. Fios, I think, offers it, a bunch of other people offer it as well. But what is the additional benefit from letting you guys put up these 32-foot poles out there? Which, I mean, is there a better way to design this? I'm not technical, but just asking.
Yeah, in Phoenix, they look like cactuses or cacti.
As one member of the community board mentioned earlier, there are always issues in terms of the size. People complain that it is too big. But I will tell you, the thing that you can do to ensure that it has the highest potential for becoming obsolete is to make it smaller. The thing that you can do to ensure that you'll have to have more rather than fewer structures is to make it smaller. Now, that might be an option in some cases. In many instances, people will continue to use the pole top structures, which are, in most instances, only good for one tenant. But as I said, that doesn't provide the same scalability as the Link 5G, and it certainly doesn't provide any of the additional services that we mentioned.
Can you discuss your backhaul network? Because Verizon, AT&T, et cetera, are never going to use your backhaul network. I'm just saying that it's a bad business plan. So I understand the idea of you need millimeter wave, you need C-band, fine. But like, what are you guys actually doing with this? That I look at it on the screen and you're going to tell me that there's a reason that we actually give up public space for this, for a purpose, because they're simply not going to do it. You guys are owned by Google or Alphabet. There's no, your privacy policy allows for device fingerprinting. So there's just no way it's happening. And so like, what is your backhaul network? What is blah, blah, blah? Are you going to tell me that you're going to allow Verizon to run its own fiber up to the top of that thing, up to its device, and then I can get behind it? But the problem is that you're walking around and saying that we already have this 10-foot thing that provides Wi-Fi everywhere. It provides the services because you installed them in our neighborhood. It was the richest neighborhood in the world. And then you come and argue about equity, which is a real point and a real thing. And it should be everywhere else in the city. The goal of having free public Wi-Fi for everyone and bridging the digital divide is amazing, because that is the silver bullet, to quote Aaron Sorkin in The West Wing. But like, when you come and tell me, to me, this is Sidewalk Labs wanting to establish digital dependencies for 5 years, 10 years, 50, whatever years down the road. And I don't buy it. So, because it's not necessary, because no one's buying this. They're going to put it's going to be on top of the buildings because they won't do the backhaul. So what is your actual business structure? Because you guys already failed eight years ago. 2014 to 2019, 2020. It didn't work. So convince me. I'm open to being convinced, because one of the biggest things that I think you guys don't celebrate enough is the gigabit centers that you guys have in each borough. Nobody knows about them. I didn't even know about them until I did the research on this. That's amazing. It's a place for complete access, for education, that's awesome. So why can't we do this everywhere? But what is actually necessary or needed about putting these poles everywhere? Other than, like, honestly, I think there are cameras on the things, my MAC address is being on. Dude, I've written the fucking scripts that can de-anonymize my own traffic walking among your own things, and I've never signed into it. And then I read your guys' whole privacy policies. So
Can we come to a
convince me that
question,
I'm wrong.
specifically for the applicant, Michael?
Yeah, I want to know, what are you guys doing? Why you are asking us to give up? You say that it's about telephone space, but telephone booths were 8, 9 feet, 10 feet tall. Telephone booths were not 30 feet tall. So you are asking us to give up public space for a private partnership. Convince me. Tell me what's going on. Because you couldn't pay $20 million. Now it's $3 million. You couldn't pay 25%. Now it's 5%. So, like, what is it? To me, it's like someone owns the infrastructure network. In 10 years, they own it. I think it's, we're going to put all sorts of sensors on these things. It's awesome. So explain it to me, man, because even in your own presentation that you went through today, you skipped over the slides that show that under 13%, under 21%, and you guys use those numbers because it's way less than that. It's under 3% that don't have access to broadband internet in our area. And I would have loved to present this in a less emotional way and a very succinct, questioned way. But the problem is that people present this as though it's about digital equity. And it's not. It's bullshit. It's people that want to go make money while they're saying, oh, digital equity, blah, blah, blah. It's bullshit. Show me digital equity. Show me you're going to do it. And I have no problem with it.
If you
Make
can,
them as tall as you want, make them as big as you want.
Fine.
My question is, what are you guys doing?
I guess a couple of things I'll pick out of that. You stated that we're owned by Google, which is not correct. We are not owned by Google.
You're owned by Alphabet. Okay, so the
We're not owned by Alphabet or Google or any.
Sidewalk Labs owns Intersection. Alphabet owns Sidewalks Labs. So
City Bridge is not owned by Sidewalk Labs.
No, okay, but is Intersection the majority partner in City Bridge?
No. So Intersection is one of 3 partners in City Bridge and does not have a controlling stake in it.
Who are the other 2 and what is their share structure?
The other 2 partners are the former maker of the Link 1.0 is a company called Civic Comtech, and the other partner is Bolden Networks, the telecommunication provider who also provides Wi-Fi and cellular communications on the subway platforms in New York City.
Cool. So we're looking at a distinction without a difference here.
In terms of your issues with respect to backhaul, I'm not quite sure I understand what they are. All of the Link 5Gs are connected with a fiber optic cable that go back to the Verizon manhole, and then a fiber optic cable from there goes to generally a Verizon central office, and then back to certain data centers throughout New York City, so that we can build a redundant network in case some of the links go down. This is backhaul.
So Verizon owns the network, not CityBridge.
The network is actually owned by Bolden, the fiber optic network. But Bolden also provides small cell on pole tops to cellular providers, and they often use the fiber backhaul provided by companies like Bolden or Crown Castle or Extenet. So I'm not sure why you believe that none of the cellular carriers would use the existing backhaul.
Because it's a shared sliced network topology. They won't do it.
Well, typically what we do is provide them dark fibers back to a shared aggregation point. But again, this has been a practice.
So have they bought? So then have they bought and subscribed to your cabinets?
Yes, we have
more than the two, more than what's been reported.
Yeah, that's what we have today. You're correct. We do not have all 4 providers signed up.
You're saying yes because you have 2 out of all of the places you can put these things. You have 2 places.
No, we have more than 2 places. We have 2 of these cellular carriers, one with a signed contract, and the others we're working with, and we're quite confident that all of them will ultimately be customers on the network. Same way they're customers on the pole top network and utilize in many instances the backhaul owned by third parties.
They have isolated fiber.
In terms of your privacy question, I understand you have some concerns about privacy, but the privacy policies for Link NYC are better than the privacy policies you're certainly going to get from most commercial internet providers. We don't know who's using our network at any time. We don't know what they're looking at. When we get subpoenas from the district attorney of the state of New York or federal subpoenas asking us to provide a user who might have used a particular kiosk at a particular time, we're unable to provide that information. So you may think that you're being tracked, but the answer is you're not.
No, I asked about device fingerprinting and the ability for consistent device representation over a spread network.
Just to clarify the question, Michael, do you mean, are you worried about advertising and advertising revenue and device tracking of unique devices that then you would get?
No, the question is actually like based on their privacy policy, it specifically says that the type of information that they collect is device fingerprinting information. That regardless if they anonymize MAC addresses, they can develop a user profile that's independent of the MAC address based on the other information that they have, and that they collect this and retain it for up to a year, that they can then monitor and track a single device across the entire city for over a year from the last time that that device actually accessed the network, which is more or less perennial. So the point is that you're looking at an individual and being able to monitor their entire movements around the city and everything they do, and that person doesn't know it. And then on top of that, because the fingerprinting is unique, you can tie that into any other advertising network and everything else you want to de-anonymize them. It's the point is it's sort of like you write something that people using lay language don't understand, but if you read it, it's like, yeah, we're going to track you and we're going to do whatever we want with it.
Well, we certainly need to be able to identify someone's device so that when they access the network, they can get on the Wi-Fi network. But I think, as you mentioned before, all of the MAC IDs are hashed when we get them. We have no idea.
Why do you do that? If it's free at public internet, why does it matter? You don't need to identify anybody.
We want to make sure that people don't have to continually sign on to the system. That's why.
Why do you have to sign
earlier that There are other Wi-Fi systems out there on the street, and that is true. In fact, the one on the subway, every time you want to use it, you need to log in again, which people often find not particularly user-friendly. The Link NYC network is much more user-friendly in that you do not need to sign in every time you go to it.
That's not an answer. You're just saying it's better. We're gonna
Okay,
track you
okay.
easily.
Michael, we're gonna take a couple more questions and then
Yeah.
we're gonna
Let
see
other
if
people talk.
any more committee members have additional questions for the presenters, and then we're gonna go to public comment, and then we'll go into business session. Another round of questions. Catherine?
So my questions, what's challenging here is that this is still new for a lot of people. And a lot of us are not techies, a lot of us are not deep into the complexity of the business model here. So if I just gently say to you, I still have questions related to the kind of public-private partnership that this is with the city. Are you doing this elsewhere in the state is my question. That's one question. And then in terms of the technology, I wondered before, and I still wonder, do you go before the Public Service Commission? Do you have a white paper or something that speaks to the public? If you're going to provide this kind of service to the public realm, then it would seem like to me your end user, your agreements and the things that you're saying to us would be in plain language and more available more widely so that people understand as a point of education and for our decision making here. And so for example, you talk about, the myth. The myth here is in vulnerable populations, people see this as a device for surveillance, that once it goes up, agencies will have the capacity to do things that allow tracking that might not come directly to you, but I don't know how much of this you own, who owns what. Some of it is supposed to be intentionally not widely available, but you're not, for me, you're not delivering enough information to the public. And then it turns into whatever people conjure up. And so those are my comments, and I would like to hear more about one, the public-private partnership relationship, how public is that, and then do you go before, because you're using a lot of infrastructure that's, you're using Con Ed, you're using the public street. There's a lot going on that is very public.
It's a fair question, and Rob, let me just touch on a few things and then turn it over to you. It's a fair question, Ms. Ellington. So what I would say is, it's worth reiterating, I think it was mentioned earlier, that the 5G is all around us, right? I mean, and we're not introducing anything novel aside from the appearance of this structure, which is, device just froze. Aside from the appearance of the structure, the design itself, which is unique, it was uniquely designed for this purpose to be able to provide all of the amenities that we talked about. The technology that's being utilized is used already. It's used all around us. It's used in New York City. It's used in every state in the country. It supports 5G service. The 5G service that we've been getting for several years, it supports the 4G LTE band that's been in service for a decade. Supports Wi-Fi, which you can get in McDonald's and Starbucks and Bryant Park and every other public space around the city. So I just want to be clear that we're not introducing anything dangerous, scary, new, different that hasn't already been introduced. Now there can be debatable. There's opinions about, is the technology safe? Is it? I read reports that it's not. I read reports that it could be harmful down the road. That's one issue that I don't want to dismiss. I do acknowledge that there's been a lot of information written about that, but it's certainly not anything new that we're introducing or supporting by way of the Link kiosks. They are just another delivery method in addition to the, I guess, about 6,700 pole top installations that are around the city that have been up for nearly 20 years that are providing very similar services. They enable carriers to put their antennas and their radio equipment in and broadcast their signal. they're the ones responsible ultimately for ensuring that they're providing a public service and making sure that they're done safely. All we do is provide the infrastructure, the vehicle by which they can transmit those signals. So I just want to be very clear that while
Just make one comment. I don't want to,
Please.
because I know other people have questions. But what a carrier provides for 5G and 4G service in the 6700, they're under a regulatory process that doesn't seem to be sitting in this space. That's what I'm trying to say to you.
Yeah, it's the same exact process, and Rob can get into it. All we're doing is providing that box where they can put their stuff in, whether they put their stuff in a box on top of a roof of a private building, whether they put their stuff in a box on top of a light pole, and there's many thousands of them, or put their equipment inside of the Link 5G. It's the exact same process. Rob, if you want to dig a little deeper into that.
No, that's exactly right, which is that when cellular carriers and others are looking for place in which they can broadcast their signal, whether they're in New York City or in Jersey City or in Hoboken, and they're looking for some combination of private property. Those poles that I saw, the big tower I showed you, those are often on highways. It might be with a state highway commission, but it might be a private property owner. And in New York City, the carrier might be dealing with some rooftop owner where he's putting a rooftop installation, or he might be dealing with the city either through a pole top installation or from a Link 5G. It's all the same service that goes to it, but ultimately those carriers need to pay for the space they're taking. We have to pay when I said before we connect to the Con Ed system. We have to pay to dig the holes in the trenches in the street to connect to the Con Ed system, and then we have to pay for power. So we're not sort of being subsidized by Con Ed. Now we are using
around subsidy. My questions are around publicly traded companies offer these telecommunication companies have a regulatory process that I don't think you're attached to because of the way in which this is presented. But I'm going to leave this here because in the interest of moving forward, thank you for, the other question is related to if you're at all, do you ever go before the Public Service Commission? I just am curious. Have you ever been? Do you sit there?
We don't go, we City Bridge or Link NYC don't go before the Public Service Commission because the only services we're providing to the public are free. It's the Wi-Fi or internet access or we sell the free telephone services. Now, separately, the mobile carriers might be selling you or other members of the public a service, and they presumably need to go before the Public Service Commission with respect to the services that they are providing.
Understood.
Thank you for that process.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Understood. Thank you.
Okay, final questions from committee members. Charles.
Yes, I got just a few quick questions for Rob. Maybe Rob, you'd like to make a note. There's a few of them. I'll try to be quick. Is the Wi-Fi system, is it secure? Meaning if someone wanted to open their bank apps and all that, if they felt there wasn't, they didn't want people, because we do hear that sometimes using free Wi-Fi is not always secure. Could a user use a VPN? That's one question. The other question is, if you had a bunch of people in the same area and they're all hooked up to that one hotspot or Wi-Fi area, does that slow down connectivity for everyone? And then the other question is, you mentioned about people, affordability and all that, and I think you mentioned about some cell phone providers being able to put their equipment in the cabinet. Are those cabinets so lucrative that maybe your company could put a bit of pressure on them and say, well, hey, you can use our cabinets, but we really want you to think about affordability, because a lot of the phone companies, the internet companies, all these Verizon, everyone, they really have not much plans for people who are on welfare. You have the federal Lifeline plan, and that's just $9 off a bill. and of course you have the phones provided by the federal government, like SafeLink and all that. But then there's conditions about that where you have to at least use it once a month, and you have to, there's, you know, et cetera, and limited text and all that. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to say, hey, you know, you're using that cabinet space, but you know, we would want you to somehow give something back to the community. Like there definitely needs to be a big change there. And then I was wondering if you're allowed to name the cell phone provider who is the one who wants to be mostly in the Flatiron district, not just for the fact that, you know, there might be people listening here who might be like, hey, I get really bad service. It'd be really cool to know what company wants to service the Flatiron area. Maybe I want to switch. So I thought maybe you could speak about that. And the last question, sorry, I know I gave you a lot. So if people are using it outside, have you thought about having some of these locations near any type of seating? You know, I can't think of people being that willing to use the Wi-Fi spot in the rain or the snow or things like that. And my last question is for Brad. I don't know, Brad, if you would be willing to work with me offline, but I don't live in the NYCHA building. I live in a building owned by a nonprofit that has several locations in the 5 boroughs. And unfortunately, they do not provide free Wi-Fi like in the NYCHA buildings. I'm just wondering if the city would work with that organization to help them have free Wi-Fi, because I believe there's a lot of fellow tenants who really could have their lives improved by having access to the internet. Maybe they could do online courses. Maybe they have access to online banking and job searching and stuff like that. And there's quite a few of us in my building in particular, because like I said, a good 410 apartments. And I know in the other locations they have quite a few. So I'm just wondering if we could bring that equal, affordable access that NYCHA residents have to people in non-NYCHA residents who are on welfare. Thank you, guys.
Right. And Rob, let me just quickly address Charles's last question. Yeah, I'd love to follow up with you offline to see if there's anything that I can do to connect you with some of the legacy providers who do offer programs for those on public assistance. They may not be free, but they're below market. But we are looking at other opportunities to expand a Big Apple Connect type service, which I mentioned is limited today to just NYCHA, just the 220 developments in NYCHA, to potentially expand it to Section 8 or other affordable housing buildings and facilities. So love to connect with you offline, so maybe the chair can make that connection for us later on.
Sure, and I'll be very quick in my responses. Yes, you can use a VPN if you have privacy concerns, but I would note that we actually are operating 2 different services on our free public Wi-Fi network. There's the free open network, and then we also have a private encrypted network. Most people use the free network unencrypted, but for those who have security concerns, you can use the encrypted network. In terms of would the network slow down if you had a lot of people? The answer is yes. At some point, if there were a very, very large number of people, the network would slow down. But I would note that this is at some level sort of the Cadillac of Wi-Fi, outdoor Wi-Fi services. We have a gigabit routers in each of the kiosks, and on a general basis, they are not that heavily utilized, so that if you stand anywhere near a kiosk, you're probably going to get better service than you could get in your home, certainly, or at your place of work. Seating, we do not provide seating. We sometimes the kiosks are located nearby parks or other places where people can sit. But we do not want people to loiter for long periods of time in front of the kiosk. We're trying to be respectful of our neighbors. Unfortunately, that happens sometimes anyway. But at this point, we don't have any plans for putting seating or anything else where people could stay for longer periods of time.
And the name of the cell phone provider, and also, do the sessions get timed out? If you can you stay hooked into it for hours and hours, or does it time you out?
You can stay. I've never stayed for hours and hours, but I don't believe the system will kick you off. You can stay as long as you like. I unfortunately am not able to disclose the name of the carrier for these particular sites, But, I'll leave it at that.
And hey, Robert, just, I know you're doing a lot and I appreciate you putting up with me. Do you feel that having the 32-foot towers increases the radius of local Wi-Fi?
It does a little. The main benefit of the Link 5G Wi-Fi versus the Wi-Fi that you'll get out of the Link 1.0 is the Link 1.0 is wasn't really designed to the extent that the Link 5G was for radio propagation. So it's sitting inside a container which probably doesn't provide the same RF transparency as the Wi-Fi, which is usually on the lowest of the 5 bays.
Right.
Now, the height does help a little bit. It's going to have fewer obstructions at that level, but the main benefit of it is, frankly, that it's in a structure which was better designed for Wi-Fi propagation.
And then the last thing, the 3 other bays that are between the rental ones, and there are some good things that those could be used for, no?
There certainly are a lot of, certainly when we came up with the structure, the main thoughts were to utilize it for mobile telecommunications. But, it essentially, as I said before, this is really just a container with power and connectivity. And as a result of that, you could use it not just for mobile communications, you might use it for, I don't know, a fixed wireless connection to reach out way in the, out in, I don't know, the Rockaways or someplace where a provider that can't otherwise get out there, we can provide a signal to. Or you can use it for other types of wireless services that maybe we don't even know today that people want to have in the future. Could we use it to connect to, a traffic system to improve traffic, zero vision policies that the city is trying to cover? We don't have specific plans that I can follow up with you today on any of those, but the fact that you have the capability now to do all of these things, I think will lead to a lot of innovations in the future.
Okay.
Sorry, one of my questions
Thank you
wasn't
very
answered earlier about the pressurizing the cell phone companies to have affordable plans.
Charles, you need to be recognized by the chair. Okay, so are there any additional questions, Michael?
No.
Okay.
I appreciate, I wanted to just run through it, and thank you guys for concerns have been heard, and that's that. And I know you guys are doing something great for everybody.
Are there any other questions from the committee?
Yes, sorry, Chair. Sorry about that. I thought I put my hand up. I apologize. One of my questions, Chair, was missed earlier. Do you mind if I repeat the earlier question for Rob?
Yes, you can repeat it if
it's very short. Yes, it was about, if you remember, Rob, I asked about the cabinet spaces. If they're lucrative, can you maybe put a bit some sort of pressure on the cell phone companies to have better affordable plans, or really look into having actual affordable cell phone plans for people who are on welfare?
Yeah, we're trying to do what we can in terms of the free services that we offer, but unfortunately, we don't really have that type of leverage over the cell phone companies when they're going out and providing services. They're relying on hundreds of different vendors, and to provide service throughout New York City, you're going to need hundreds or thousands and thousands of sites. We're providing a relatively small percentage, and unfortunately, you really can't exercise any sort of pressure or leverage on the carriers to change their policies.
Great. Thank you so much for answering our questions. Seeing that there are no other additional questions from the committee, we will now go to public comment. Starting with members of the public who are in the room.
Okay, where do I sit, or where do I go?
You can just talk.
Right here, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Odette Wilkins, and I'm a corporate technology transactional attorney. I'm also executive director and general counsel of the New York City Alliance for Safe Technology, because there are many community boards that have had similar concerns. And right now we have 16 community boards that have filed for moratoria or disapprovals. for the 5G towers. There's a couple more that I'm working with who are going to be coming on board as well. 5G is a new technology. It is a beamforming technology. It is nothing like 3G or 4G. As a matter of fact, it is software-based. So in terms of any possible security breaches, they're far greater with 5G than they ever were with 3G or 4G. Because it is a software-based system, you get access to one node, you have access to all the nodes. And because the 5G network requires so many surface areas in order to get connectivity.
Nadia, how are you?
I'm sorry.
So please continue.
That increases the surface area for hackers. The other thing is that the FCC is under court order since 2021 to review 11,000 pages of scientific studies, peer-reviewed, showing harm within their limits. The court reprimanded the FCC and called them and said that they were arbitrary and capricious in ignoring those studies and required them to review those studies, particularly with respect to long-term exposure and exposure to children and to the environment. The FCC has failed to do so. There is no one minding the story in terms of safety, not the FCC, FDA, CDC, and not the EPA. The EPA came out with studies back in the 1990s showing harm. They were then defunded. There is no one minding the story. So, and there have also been case studies specifically with respect to 5G, and every single one of them has shown harm. Cell towers that have been placed close to elementary schools. There was one elementary school where children came down with cancer. Teachers came down with breast cancer, and one of those children unfortunately died last month. This is not something to play with. These are dangerous instrumentalities. And while the 5G towers will also have 4G in them, 4G can travel for miles and miles. The reach is about 9 miles, perhaps, even longer. That is not something that you would want to have outside of your window. That's a very powerful radiation. And also with respect to the free fiber. The fiber is free so long as City Bridge installs it. But if it's installed by third-party providers, from my reading of the contract, it states that once the franchise agreement expires with the city will have to pay market rate for that fiber. So that is not something that's free to the city. I have an entire position paper on this, which I can definitely share with the community board. I've been asked to present at the community boards, and so I'd be happy to give a fuller presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to provide comment? Okay, seeing none, I will now take the conversation and the committee into business session. We've definitely heard a lot of very strong opinions. How are people feeling about where we stand? We've got just to set this up and pull this back to the conversation of what we've been requested to do is that we provide comment like as a community board, but also through the program to provide comment specifically. We need to provide some form of comment on these proposed locations, but we can also revisit our previous policy, which I've sent around, and our prior resolution from January 2023, where, just to remind folks, that resolution resolved to disapproved and asked that all future installations not happen in our district until all of our concerns were addressed, which we can go through some of those comments additionally too. But so we have some options for how we want to proceed. How does the committee want to, anyone want to lead us off on this?
Chair, may I?
Sure, Charles.
So, from hearing the public speaker, I don't know if there's an option to wait and maybe call the public speaker to give us more information, but I think, as we know, there's always two sides to the story, and I think with what we heard today in the public session, I think I would like to hear more about these studies. I'd like to hear more about what happened to some of these people who live near these towers and things like that. And I don't know if it's a possibility to bring that person back in or hear another side of the story. And I also feel, as someone who is on welfare, I feel like there's no rush for me, for someone who is low income, for these towers, because I don't see a big, huge benefit. The benefit for someone who's on welfare like me would be actually indoor free Wi-Fi than outdoor. But I really think we should, if it's possible, if my fellow members agree, I think it'd be great to have that opportunity to invite the public speaker back, who's attorney, who seems to have done research and really looked into this matter, to hear the other side of, you know, to hear the negatives. We only heard one side of this story about these towers, so that's how I feel.
Thank you, Charles. Just as a reminder to everyone, we have to provide comment and come up with sort of our policy on these proposed towers before October 30th. That is the deadline. So this is the meeting in which we need to have something come out of it on those. And obviously this is a new situation. So coming up with a framework for how we're going to evaluate these things, because depending on how our conversation goes and whether things are moving forward, we don't want to lose our ability to comment.
Then Chair, just one last thing. I feel we should just stay without, oh, sorry. Oh,
Please wait to be recognized. Thank you, Charles. Yes, John.
For purposes of discussion, it seems to me that there are two separate things we're dealing with. Number one, the overarching our view of what policy we should have toward these towers and these services in general. And then secondly, do we approve the locations? But it seems to me that those two are at odds. In other words, if we can't agree on the overall view of whether this is a good idea or not, then how do we decide on the actual locations? So I guess I would like for the chair to clarify that. Are we saying one approach could be, let's assume that we're okay with the towers, just for purposes of this argument. If we're okay with that, then are we okay
What
with
are our
the locations,
criteria?
right?
I think,
Because
yeah.
to me, that's where we've got to go, because I don't see any of us addressing this broader issue in this meeting. So we just have to sort of put that to a side and say, if for a chance we were
I think
okay,
that addresses the second portion of if these, it's more of a question, the way that I have understood it is, if these are coming anyway and we don't really have a lot of say and no one's going to listen to us,
If not the case.
then my understanding of that is not entirely clear at this moment in time. So I'm not sure, but I also think that it's important that we have some sort of position in a broader sense, because I can also see it going, not if we approve, I can see it as we disapprove, we don't want them anywhere, just
Well, I was
hypothetically.
gonna say, if you take the
Yeah.
view that we have a problem
With all of
policy
them.
level, then it's the easy answer. You approve none of it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of evaluating the criteria because these are going to continue to come before us. So we want to have a pretty standard way to address it. We also can do, you were on the committee previously, so maybe you can give some insight into that thought process behind the prior resolution of just doing a standard one. But I believe it also just addressed the one tower that was being applied for at that time, or two
Right,
towers.
yeah.
We've had a lot more applications come in as it's progressed anyway. So we don't want to lose the ability to comment on that, even if we were not, I don't know where we are in this yet, but like, even if we were to say we don't approve of any of them, but given that we don't approve of any of them, we still don't want to lose the ability to Todd's earlier comment, like, would it impact them to move up like half a block away, or move, like one of the prior resolution mentions criteria of like, it needs to be more than 10 feet from a residence, like that policy needs to be reevaluated. So we can go several different directions with this.
Right, but if you go to second, if you start saying we want it 10 feet this way or 10 feet that way, that assumes that you've already, there's a presumption that you're okay with the overall process. I'm just saying that the net result of what's gonna happen here. That by picking, saying we're okay with this location, not okay with that location, I'm fine with that. We're making we're not approving the overall policy, but we're assuming for purposes of this discussion that policy is in place.
So Libby, could I provide some more information to the committee just about?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there is actually one narrow way where like we actually are being asked to comment actually, and it's under National Historical Preservation Act. There's a section 106 that has been decided needs to be enforced. So we have the opportunity to comment very specifically about the character and in the sense of a landmarks preservation committee, about how something could impact things very close to it. But because the way laws are written, 500 feet becomes half a mile, we could theoretically make an argument against everything. So as John Harris said, it's sort of up to what we want to do. And I at least thought you guys should be aware that that's one specific thing. And then if it's not a previous telephone site, we have a statutory 60-day right to comment.
And that is like under broader criteria that would include things like this is too close to a public park, or this is in a public park and we like it so people can use the internet, whichever way the committee wants to go with this, but I'm very interested to hear.
And more likely somebody just like made a mistake. And so when I was looking at all of this, I wrote up this document, which I'm not sure if you all have in front of you, but I was drafting off of other matrices that we've used in different situations on different committees about how and why something could be permissible or not permissible, even if we had an ambiguous stance on it, like John brought up. So I'll leave it at that.
That's good. It's an important criteria. So I think we should stick with maybe the first criteria of what is our opinion of these towers sort of in general. And that might inform some of our broader discussion. So does anyone, I'm seeing several opinions here. But Myrtle, do you have?
Yeah, so I mean, my issue with these towers is twofold. One, I don't like the way they look. It says over here that the design of the towers was approved by the Public Design Commission. I don't know what other alternatives they looked at, if they fit in better, maybe this is the best alternative they came up with. That's one. The other thing is, it's unclear to me what the city's residents really are getting in return for giving up public space. Which if the motivation is just to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the motivation is really just to make this project more viable financially when it wasn't necessarily thought through the first time around, then that's just not adequate for me. I think that if we are going to make the case for equity, then whoever uses these towers to provide coverage, there should be some sort of a mandatory requirement to provide, free 5G services to people who can't afford it. Some sort of equity component to it, which, as things stand right now, it's unclear to me where that's coming from. So those are my two concerns, really.
Okay, I'll go to questions online. Catherine.
I would like to know how much written public comment we've gotten. We did post on the website, if you know, Libby, if there have been an outpouring, because as I tried to just kind of take a quick look, it is noteworthy that a significant number of community boards have really had some kind of pushback here. some have gone as far as to call for a moratorium. That said, I think it's also an opportunity for us to understand that, block by block, district by district, every community board is different. So if we're talking about towers that are in, primarily less residential areas, more, I think those are some of the criteria that are important here, given the landscape. I think we can do more than one thing at a time. I think we can look at the applications before us as a way to, or the locations before us, to go ahead and move forward, but to also talk about, until tonight, I wasn't really clear about, I'm a lot more clear, but I think it's still more work to be done. I think we can do more than one thing at one time.
Okay, Todd.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can't see you though.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Todd.
Okay. So I'm looking at our resolution, which I voted in favor of. And what it said, the key point, we're talking about the resolution, I guess from last year, where this issue came up before. It said, Community Board 5 disapproves the installation of any Link 5G towers until such time as all interested parties, including CV5 residents, business owners, and community groups, have a better opportunity to provide input and more information about locations. So, the issue of 5G and whether it's right, whether it's a technology that our city should be investing in, that is, a larger issue that will be played out by our other elected branches. We'll have our opportunity to comment on that. I'm in the technology business myself. What I could tell you is that, my knowledge of it is that the 5G and the additional bandwidth and speed that it offers is something, the future productivity and competitiveness of New York City over time is going to depend on having that service up and about, in the streets. I'll just give you one solid example, which is that there are many areas or many buildings which are stuck with monopoly choices when it comes to having high-speed internet access. And the service that's going to be provided by these towers is going to break that monopoly in many cases. So, that wasn't touched upon, but that's an important factor. We don't know how that's going to play out, but I would simply, as a community board that balances and tries to look out for, the overall interest of everybody, we should keep that in mind. I think what we should do, and I think what our board is looking for us to do, is to come up with a mechanism or set of standards that we can act on these applications. I think Michael's matrix is a good start on that. I think that matrix can be narrowed and sharpened. It's worth a little bit more work. We should appoint some people to work with Michael now that he's gotten a start on it. And really, what is our role as a community board and a committee? It's to comment on the suitability in our neighborhood, based on our knowledge of our neighborhoods, where these things should go, and if possible, listen to what everybody has to say and move them as necessary. We heard from the applicant that within reason, they can move these towers, right? The people that are making the decisions about where to place these things, I don't know that they're paying attention to all the different interests that we have. I think that, we've got 9 towers. We have enough time where we can work with Michael's matrix and come back and give a little bit more time for our public to submit comments about whether these things are suitable. If we decide that we just don't want any of them anywhere, which just my own personal decision, I think that would be misguided, but we could certainly move in that direction. And if the applicant and the people, the interest putting up these towers dig in their heels and refuse to move or make reasonable requests for modifications after we've done these things, then I don't see any reason why we should alter our resolution from a year and a half ago. So, those are my comments. What is our role? Our role, we know our community better than a lot of the other branches of government. We got to listen and use our knowledge, come up with some recommendations. We should separate that issue, from whether or not the 5G is even wanted, right? We can comment on that separately. And I think that, is the direction we should move in.
Okay. Charles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry about earlier. I'll try to be more mindful with the being recognized. I'm sorry about that. So I was just thinking, in the city, we have quite a lot of free Wi-Fi access, like I mentioned, Madison Square Park, the Flatiron, Starbucks, CVS. I think a matrix would be great. I just want to say, I think what Todd says is a great idea, because if the whole point of it is to bring connectivity and affordability to those who can't get to the internet, we should maybe outline where in our district is areas, residential areas where it's hard for people to get internet access. Because, like, for example, I'm in the central business district and I can get free Wi-Fi from numerous sources. So I think, placing them in areas where there's plenty of free Wi-Fi wouldn't make sense. I think we need to look at areas where, there's gaps in getting Wi-Fi, and some sort of matrix, like we do with the cannabis task force about not having cannabis places close to schools and churches and all that. Maybe, adding that, to kind of address what our public speaker said about the concerns about schools, especially, to maybe add that to a matrix, saying, it shouldn't be in any proximity to schools and daycares and stuff like that. So I'm definitely in favor for some sort of matrix, just like we do for the when we do for applications to Madison Square Park and all that, we use a matrix about noise and stuff like that. So I'll be all in favor for that that kind of a approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
There was
see if any-
a comment that I forgot to add, Libby. Can I just very quickly add it?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add my support for the other comment that was made and the response by the people appearing before us. In parks, it has always been our philosophy that if we give up the public space for what is a private interest, albeit mixed with a possible public good, that we ask for something in return. So they're taking the space in our public realm, and what are they giving back? Broadly, they're giving back the 5G and the technology and all of that. But how about something substantial? Everything that's been said about making sure that the 5G service at reasonable cost can be given to the disabled or to people that can't afford it or people on public assistance. It's within our right to keep asking for that. And what I heard from the applicant that they don't have.
To interject 1 second, it's just because you keep saying that
We're gonna. I'll come to you in a second, Michael. I'm gonna come to you in a second after Todd's comment, but please let Todd finish.
I'm gonna be brief, I promise. So all I'm saying is that what I heard from the applicants about how they don't have the clout with the major suppliers to get them to do these sort of things, right? Well, they may not have the clout, but the city is the one letting the contract, and it's within our rights. It's our responsibility to tell the city and the people that let these contracts that they have to make that a condition or change the contracts to make that happen.
Okay, Michael.
And sorry, Todd, and sorry to the committee for cutting Todd off. I did not mean to be rude, but one of the key issues in all of this that keeps being repeated and being lost in this is that these new towers do not provide 5G access to anyone until Verizon or AT&T or Charter or any of these other providers rent and buy the space in them. And that's one of the issues, is that our neighbor, and this has been a big issue with the entire Link NYC system, is that our neighborhood, our district, is incredibly well served and has all of these Wi-Fi kiosks, etc. We have the service. So the question becomes, why are we then going to give away the next, the 10 to 32 feet at all these other places? We don't need it. It's not, there's not an equity issue here. The disadvantaged people are not going to have your $70 a month Verizon plans and $1,200 iPhones that subscribe to these phones and these systems. So there's no equity issue in our neighborhood. The Wi-Fi exists. We have free public Wi-Fi. And within the thing that I sent around, I showed where all of these sites are. And this is great. And this is fantastic. And we want it to be sustainable and we want it to continue. But one of the other problems is that if they can't run a system that in the sort of like most important, most impressive targeted eyeballs in the world, they can't run an advertising network and make a profit on it, that's concerning. So like maybe someone else should do it. But so my biggest point just in all of this is it's like, why do we need the big towers? And then, so that's why I was asking the representative from OTI and the representative from City Bridge and whether Bolden or their consortium, that if they can tell me that they actually have contracts with AT&T, with Verizon, with T-Mobile to do this, great. But the problem is T-Mobile has already said very publicly in articles that I put in the appendix to this thing, that they're like, we already serve 97 to 99% of our customer base, both inside buildings and in their homes, and they blanket New York in 5G. So I don't buy the argument that this new use case of these towers that we're gonna you couldn't meet the financial obligations of the first deal, so now you're suddenly going to be able to do it. No, it's like a long play about getting someone involved and exposed and necessary and having to use this one provider when we get to the real city of like smart city, IoT, blah, 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 the things that are coming in the next couple of years. And that's what it's there for. And then we have to use them. And I don't think it's worth it for us. That's my biggest concern is like, so if they could share the backhaul network with AT&T, if they could share it with Verizon, if everybody could, if there were actually a way to do this without software sharing, which you cannot do in these mission critical infrastructures, then I would be open to it. And we could sacrifice that public space. But right now, they're not making the argument. The only argument they're making is equity, but all of the equity in their own PDFs, in their own surveys, it's everywhere else in the city.
Thanks, Michael. Todd?
No, I'm sorry. I had my hand up by mistake.
Okay.
I'm good.
I want to hear from some folks who maybe haven't been speaking up, like opinion-wise as much. K-Pac, do you have any thoughts in general on where?
I just have a question. I thought, I'm a little confused now because I thought that Rob did say that the infrastructure that would be put in these poles can be used by any provider and would not be just tied down with one provider.
I think that he said that it can be, they're essentially providing like a telephone pole cabinet structure, but like a very, very big one.
Sure.
And that's why it's larger. And that's why these are necessary as opposed to like the lamppost one.
No,
I think it was more like they haven't
not the
secured,
design,
they
but
haven't secured the contracts yet.
but any service provider, they're not locked in with one service provider. Anybody,
It could be multiple
it could be multiple.
if they wanted to use, if the service provider wanted to use that contract. I believe, Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I was commenting on the
Already been.
backhaul because City Bridge and Bolden does, according to the franchise agreement, they do own the fiber from the pole to somewhere else. So the idea that like AT&T, when it does something on the top of a building, it puts it there because they own the fiber to the top of the building back to their data center. They don't, in my experience, they do not want to share going to a 5G pole in the middle of New York with 3 other providers that have the same access. It's a competitive disadvantage. That's the issue. They will lease to anyone that wants to lease. The problem is that they only have one backhaul up into the cabinet.
So in that sense, they are locked in with that one provider.
Well, and not only locked in, but it's Bolden Networks. It's City Bridge. They own that last mile back to the data center, wherever it is in New York. Like the micro trenching, the blah, blah, like if you read the franchise agreement, it gets weird. But like the cable from that pole to a central reasonable point of where it's not gigabit, it's like terabit. You know what I mean? It's one of those rooms in a building. And AT&T, that's why I kept pressing them and asking them. I'm like, if you guys have contracts that say that people want to use this, that T-Mobile wants to, or Verizon wants to, or AT&T actually wants to do this, then we can talk about it being a viable business model. But I've never heard of anyone doing that. To my knowledge, there were 2 that were published in the New York Times, and that's it so far. If they have more, good for them. I wish them the best. But it's a real concern.
John.
Yeah, I have like to get a clarification from Michael. In essence, I think I'm hearing you say that the equity issue doesn't apply because CV5 is in effect saturated already. You know, we've almost 100%. My question to you, just so I understand the argument a bit more, what about all the people who don't live in CV5 but come to CV5? Is that potentially, tell me why that's not an equity issue? Because you might, you have millions of people coming into CV5. It's the most, ventured area in all of New York. A lot of those people may not have, the service. So can you just help me understand, walk me through your thinking?
Yeah, it's in essence, it's because they put their first generation Link NYC towers, they put in our district. And so it's like, here, I'll just show. This is where this image on the right, if my screen is being shared.
Yeah.
The image on the left is where current Link NYC kiosks are throughout the city. And on the right is where current Link NYC kiosks are and it's focused in on our area. So there's pretty good coverage. So the point is if they already have all of the, like, hundreds of towers right around here, why do they need to start putting 20-foot towers on that?
I've got a follow-up question to that. But are they saying that the 5G offered, like, the Wi-Fi connectivity with these towers? My understanding is that it's faster than what the Linksys can offer. The Link NYC.
That was one of my last questions to them, and he's here, he can speak to it, but I was asking if there was a wider radius. To me, it's probably a backhaul thing, but I'll let him speak. It's his call.
I will recognize that
Or
if it is
or
possible.
if you want, sorry, Libby, if you want to, that's not my call. Sorry.
Robert, if you would like to answer, I will recognize you to address that question.
Sure. Thank you. The Wi-Fi is at some level similar to the Wi-Fi being provided on all the map that Michael's got up there. As I mentioned before, it is somewhat better because it's a better structure. But given the number of Wi-Fi sites we already have, obviously adding up to 10 is not going to make a huge difference to the wider Wi-Fi footprint. The reality is we're moving toward this new structure in part because we need additional revenue streams to keep the franchise going, and we're also trying to meet the needs of, as I said before, mobile carriers, and we do have a particular mobile carrier who wants these sites. So that is the driving force. And what's good about the link, there's a lot of free Wi-Fi out there. There's no doubt about it. I'm sure there are lots of people providing small free Wi-Fi networks in Manhattan 5. What makes Link NYC special in that regard is a gentleman asked a question before about people coming into Manhattan 5 from other places. Because Link NYC is a city-wide system, we've got people all over, and because they don't have to sign in over and over again, it's a system that can serve people from the outer boroughs a lot better than perhaps a local system they might not know about. So that's the response. And I just wanted to ask the chair, did you want us, I think Brett might have dropped. Did you want me to stay on? I felt like I might be intruding being here, so.
Oh, no, you were very much welcome to be here. And certainly if you do not mind, I think we do have some additional questions. That was helpful.
I'll stay on then.
But no, you're not required to, but if you feel it'll be helpful. I did just want to follow up on something you said that has sort of been glossed over just to get sort of clarity. Is it on these 10 or is it 15 towers? Did you say that you cannot tell? I understand that there might be an NDA, so you can't tell us what cellular carrier you are trying to contract with to use it, but have you secured a cellular client who would like to use the towers that you are proposing so that cell phone service that has 5G service would also be faster in those areas?
All of these sites have a cellular carrier who is interested in using them. So there will be cellular service being provided from all of the sites that we get approved and are able to construct.
And so just to follow up on that, is it how far along are those, have you signed a contract with them that's conditional upon this going through? What's the state of that process? So I think that's some of what the committee had questions about as far as the public-private, the cost benefit analysis.
It's part of these are obviously just a few sites that are part of a larger initiative with this particular carrier in other locations throughout New York City, but none of these sites will go up unless there is a mobile carrier putting equipment in it. It won't happen the day after we put the site up. I think, as Michael might have mentioned, at this point we put up, I don't know, close to 200 sites, and some of them have mobile carrier commitments. In the past, we put up some sites without a mobile carrier commitment initially, but more recently, we're only putting up sites with a mobile carrier commitment behind it. But even once we get the site up, putting the mobile carrier's radios into the site and then connecting those radios into the mobile carrier's larger network will take some time after we get the site installed and activated.
But prior to, just again, sorry to be very like pedantic about this, but you're not gonna put up these gigantic towers unless, and invest in that infrastructure, you're saying, unless you already have like a very solid and committed like contract with the carrier, or are you saying that it's like a potential option?
No, it's the former. You're correct that we are not building these unless we have the commitment from the carrier. So no sites will be built and or installed without that. All of these sites will have a mobile carrier in them.
Okay, and so these sites that you were proposing, you already have that contract and sort of commitment with someone ready to go in, recognizing that the infrastructure wouldn't happen instantaneously because radios need to get hooked up and torn up ground and all of that stuff, but there is a solid commitment that it's not like wishful thinking and prototyping.
That is correct.
Okay. Michael, I was wondering if does that change some of your commentary with some of like the research that you've done?
It helps. I have to start my video. No, it definitely helps. I am still curious about the necessity, and this is a general thing with me about why we need to take public space for something that's private, and like, if everybody else can figure it out, like, what's the actual reason for this? That's really my question. And so, but again, if you have a commitment from one carrier, it's sort of just like, why don't you put it on top of a telephone pole? Like, it's a weird thing. Like,
okay, I'm hearing the public-private partnership element, but also the aesthetic element there. I haven't heard as much about the aesthetic concerns, but our past resolution has certainly commented on like the size and scale. My question is also similar of, it's such an intrusive structure.
and it doesn't do anything for the public, because even if it's a private carrier in there, say it's Verizon, all that does is make signals for Verizon subscribers better. That's still a private taking of a public space for Verizon and its people and the operators of the City Bridge network. So I don't know how you can tell someone that like bought an apartment, that put all of the money they've ever earned in their life into something, and then you're going to stick this thing in front of their window because Verizon wants to do it. And Verizon whereas it could just, but Verizon negotiates these contracts thousands of times a day all over the country for just putting it on a building. Like, I looked at one of the positions across from Bryant Square Park, and like 3 of the antennas are actually owned by OTI. So it's like they at a base height of 63 feet to 84 feet. So it's sort of like, why? What's going on? Give me the explanation.
I think that also brings up some of the questions about like the public-private partnership and how other cities have sort of handled the similar issues.
Well, and one thing that really concerned me is that Toronto canceled a deal with Sidewalk Labs over the privacy issue. So it's something else that came up in my research. And especially when I read the privacy agreement, I read the entire franchisee.
We can't hear you.
Michael, can you speak up?
Sure, yeah. I read the franchisee agreement, I read the terms of service, I read the privacy agreement, and I read the amendments to it. And it's very weird because it almost sounds like the privacy agreement is written to specifically allow device fingerprinting. I've never seen anything like it. So
And that
I-
brings up the public comment about hacking.
That's an issue with
too.
the existing infrastructure, right? We're not currently debating whether or not these Link NYC kiosks should even exist.
No, this is for the 5G ones,
Is
there's,
there a privacy concern around the new 5G?
I think that there's a privacy concern around the new 5G
Oh.
based on the research that Michael did. And then also I would have to check into what that public comment was about hacking. And have like a security.
No, actually, he's making a valid point that this is an objection in general. I would have to look at whether it was changed in the amendments to the franchisee agreement or in the initial one. But the fact of the matter is that what is allowed, what they say they are recording is device fingerprinting. And so yes, there is an issue with Link NYC in general. So I'm not gonna like go and support the expansion of a system that's already broken, especially because they didn't pay their bills and they weren't managed properly and they were almost shut down and they almost went into bankruptcy. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's like, why don't we just like Spain and Barcelona or something? Why don't we just run it as a municipal Wi-Fi network? Why can't we look at other systems? Why isn't there the level of oversight that we have over Con Edison that we have with our electrical network? So to me, that's, if you want to go to the level of Con Ed and have that level of oversight, I'm fine. But I am not interested in these sorts of public-private partnerships where we surrender control over our own very lives to people we don't vote for.
I do think that the regulatory control speaks a little bit to some of Catherine's questions earlier about sort of information and public access, too, which we've heard, which I think is interesting. Todd.
Hi, everybody. Just as I think about this and listen to the conversation, I would go back to my own experience as a small businessman and what I said earlier. You know, why should we as a community board give up the public structure, the public realm? First of all, I hear what Michael's saying. You know, the idea that New York City is going to build its own municipal Wi-Fi network, that's just philosophically New York City and much of our country just doesn't work that way, right? As much as it might be a good idea. But I would also point out that I would also point out that why build this? You know, again, I get back to the anti-monopoly aspect of this. Michael makes a good point. Whether or not this franchise, this company, whether or not they're the right one that the city has picked out to do this, is something that we could certainly investigate. But whoever is doing it, right? The fact that it's so hard and difficult for any small or mid-sized company to actually build those towers on buildings and do what Verizon and the major companies are doing to implement 5G, that this effort, whatever it is part of an effort that will open up a space for newer companies or other companies that will allow them to get into the 5G business over time. That is a worthy effort. The fact that the city is doing this, they're trying to do it in a way that it's going to apply over the whole city. Yes, it's true that Verizon and these other large companies are looking at this map. They're all over the place and they've bought out the rights in all the buildings. But you know what? By having the city, by creating this alternative method for the 5G, and again, I would say to Michael that why do we need it? It's true that a lot of the people don't need 5G, don't want 5G. But that's looking backwards. There are applications that are going to run on phones that are going to be critical, you know, to everybody, not just businesses, that need the 5G, and the more choice they have among vendors going down the road, the better off they'll be. Okay, that's, just a thought.
John?
In the interest of time, it seems that we're sort of going over the
In
map.
circles, yeah.
It seems to me we need to focus on what we need to do tonight. It seems to me, Todd, I'm gonna sort of leverage off of what Todd and Michael said. If we look at our previous resolution, we said we need to have further discourse to see whether we are in agreement
Yeah,
with this scheme or not. However, if the scheme is gonna happen, this is the criteria we will use
yeah,
to decide which of these towers we will approve. It seems to me we've got to come up with some sort of construct, because we're not gonna address tonight whether
yeah.
we're in favor of this scheme or not. I can see that.
We
Right.
do need to
So we gotta
provide
say-
comment in
Right,
some
we gotta
kind. So I guess our
comment on the
first,
actual location.
well, but we,
And not say we're agreeing with the scheme, we're just saying, if it happens, this is
Yeah.
the criteria.
I mean, I think that we should definitely continue to work on with what I'm hearing, what everyone has said, is that it sounds like we need more time to really develop that criteria and continue to build on it. And I'm curious what people have to say about that. But I also agree with you that I think that our next move for right now, especially being mindful of the time, is that we can maintain our prior stance.
Right.
That we don't like the design for aesthetics. Let me look at my list. Because what I've heard tonight is
language that Todd used, I think, is particularly important. It's the last language we use in the resolution.
yeah, that we don't, until such time as we are able to provide better public comment, have a longer period of time.
Right.
But we can also begin our own internal process, which maybe is what we're gonna set up and say we need more time to really look into this. Set up a task force. I know for cannabis, they really spent a lot of time and really got a lot of public comment about that. But we previously asked for the design to be different, to be a better description for why they can't just be smaller. We've asked for them to be farther away from residences. What I've also heard tonight is the aesthetics. Really, again, coming back to what's the public-private partnership. It doesn't seem to be a lot of financial revenue that's coming in from these, and they still have a policy from the other ones. I guess it's possible if there's 5G connectivity from cell phone carriers, it might become more profitable, but if it's $3 million a year, I think that we should consider that in exchange for the use of that sidewalk as a consideration, which we've also mentioned previously with our president, and sort of the landscape in general of the connectivity currently, but also just not a lot of benefit if the major cell phone carriers don't currently have them, though it does sound like there is some on the way. And I definitely take Todd's point that from a monopoly perspective, this maybe provides different opportunities from a business perspective, but that without more information and also without really addressing why this specific design next to all of these historic landmarks, I believe that the framework that Michael looked at with all of his research really got into that. And then what else am I hearing? I'm hearing your comment about the equity of people who come into the city is definitely a concern, which maybe is in favor of it. But so we could have a resolution to that effect. Also the regulation, correct me if I'm wrong, the regulation element and the public equity piece of it. I think I'm probably, and the data and privacy concerns, the hacking concerns, and then the health concerns that are brought up by members of the public. That we can say that until we have more time to fully discuss it, we could just deny all of them and be consistent with our prior precedent. And
Sure.
also we want to continue the conversation. That is
Sure.
one option that I'm hearing.
I draw your attention to one thing that's separate from where we're resolving on this. Which is that we have a limited amount of time until October 31st to comment as a consulting party on these 10 proposed sites.
So,
And-
so that what I'm saying is that if we decide we want more time, that is what would go into the proposed sites. Our issue would be no
They
on
won't-
all of them.
they-
We just
they
don't
won't-
want them.
But what I'm saying is they won't give it to us for that with this this is an actual legally required federal review thing that, and this is why they're here, in essence. In that
Yes.
we can write and pass things that have to, because of the character and the nature of everything in our district, we can write something for each one of these sites that will ultimately block it if we want to. Because
Are you, and that is the
because we can
framework?
talk about the Chrysler Building or Grand Central and the nature of a corridor and things like the way that it works is it's 250 feet or 500 feet or it's half a mile or something like that. But if we write something,
I don't think I agree with that.
But that, yeah, that isn't.
That's not why we were rejecting.
No, absolutely
We
not.
don't have the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, that totally goes against, I mean, I am totally with Todd on the need for better infrastructure and constantly improving infrastructure in the city. You know, I mean, this does not sound right to me.
Yeah, I agree with
but so
Todd.
I'm not making a case either way. I'm just letting you know that if we don't make a comment, then the 9 sites that are on this thing, they will go up. We right now have the opportunity to comment on them, either move them or weigh in, prevent that.
But wait a
So-
minute, just a point of information here. If we don't deliberate by the 30th, we're not the only ones holding the power for this to go forward or
Well,
not. I mean,
No,
other
it will go forward.
We
other
actually are.
community boards, other community. Mhm.
Sorry,
what
we have like a
Go ahead,
specific.
Libby, I'm sorry.
As a commenting party, Michael knows a little bit more about this, but as a commenting party, we actually have more power than just a community board. The community board has been secured as a commenting party, which gives us more power and more oversight than we would ordinarily have.
Which is different than other places. Is that what you're saying? Other places across the
Correct.
city? So
Other
they,
community
if that is the case, I understand the urgency and the need, but there is still, I don't know that we solved that all in this moment. So that's the issue. I understand better the urgency. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the options then initially that it sounds like we're moving away from now is that if we had come up with staying with our prior resolution and that we generally, I don't hear anything really different from what our complaints were before. It doesn't really seem like they've been addressed in any sort of substantive way as far as the aesthetics or location or benefit. Though, you know, maybe there's an added benefit of equity that I'm maybe underestimating here. But I think mostly we came that wrong, but we do encourage, I think I'm also hearing a lot of strong comments about wanting a smart city and wanting that connectivity as long as there is data protection and as long as these other like broader like ethos concerns have been addressed.
That should be part of the resolution.
And that is sort of part of this overarching resolution. And then as far as the site specific stuff, that goes to the aesthetic concerns in general and also like the historic nature of all of them, which Michael has gone up with the like historic preservation. And I believe that the historic preservation did have some problems with some of these locations as well. So we have the option, my understanding is that we have the option to say that we have generally the same policy, but we are in favor, like for some reasons, which I would love to hear. And then using that, we can also comment on, because this aesthetic thing has not been addressed and it's not been made clear why it has to be this gigantic thing as opposed to one on a light pole, we're in favor of one on the light pole instead. So yeah, John.
Well.
But it sounds like, are you in favor of going through each one by one to comment or?
Bringing something, and I don't know where I'm gonna sit, but I like to see where everyone else is coming from. If we operate on the assumption that this is gonna happen, this is the real world. This is gonna happen. Which ones
can we live with?
Yeah, which ones can we live with and which ones can't we live with? And I guess, but I'm not saying let's do that. I'm asking, I want to get feedback from the committee. Should we just deal with the real world? This is gonna happen.
So that is where I
If
think we
that's gonna
have,
happen, which ones do we have objections to or not? That's separate from whether we are in agreement with the scheme overall.
that is where I think we have a little bit more time because it's, you know, September 30th and our deadline is October 30th. So what we could do tonight is do a resolution that says like, we don't like them all for these reasons and write the resolution on that. And then also acknowledge like, as a result, we don't approve of these. And then additionally go into like, we're going to develop our own framework and sort of rubric that's going to take more time. And then my understanding is that then we can send that as a letter to these specifically, commenting on that. I think that is sufficient for our letters and our commenting. Would have to check with Brad as far as how much of it needs to go through full board, but the way that other committees have used like the committee work structure, which gives us a little bit more time to do sort of offline work to look at each location using these rubrics and using these kind of frameworks to actually then send our comment on the specific things sort of separately, but with the understanding that we say in the resolution that the board votes on of, we don't like any of these. This is how we're going to be thinking about this, using sort of these considerations and this proximity stuff. And so then our more developed letter for the comment is based on that resolution.
But Todd's not saying that, is he? Todd's saying, I mean, I'm not.
We might not all be in agreement
Yeah,
on
we
this.
may not be in agreement with all that. That's why I'm coming back to the view.
Right.
Should we just
But
assume?
Libby, I have a dog barking, but I would argue that the moment we don't actually use a historical preservation defense, we waive it. If I were City Bridge, the moment that we did not exercise it, I would use that as criteria to put them wherever they want.
I mean, I do think that there are historical elements to many of these locations, and I am hearing a lot of agreement around the aesthetic
Doesn't
concerns.
that belong to landmarks too?
That also belongs in landmarks, but the period for the traditional things, so some of that, Brad and I have spoken that we need to like loop mark in more. Some of this stuff was happening over the summer. So we haven't really had time because Parks is the one that has the ability to comment, but without the landmarks ability. So, and because the resolution came out of Parks before for these different sort of public space, physical crowding around it, if it can't go very far, and sort of that presentation of it, I think that we can just stay the same and say that like, we just want a moratorium on all of them for right now. And we are still preserving our right to give comment of, we hate this thing, we don't like it. If you had to do it, we would prefer it a little bit more, but still hate it if you moved it.
We hate this
Libby, this is a statutory thing. They will go up. If we do not comment by the 31st, they will go up.
They all go up.
We have the opportunity right now to comment.
Right.
This type of writing that is on the screen will block it. They can't, it's a very weird thing. We actually.
I don't want to interrupt your discussion, but just to be clear, you have the 30 days, I think, which is the 90-day letter you received from OTI. As you are talking about, you are correct. There is a separate review process that Michael is pointing out here under section 106. But to comment in that process, you need to send your comments to either the New York State Historical Preservation Office or utilize the comment aspect that we have on the website that we're using to manage that process. And those comments will get funneled to the State Historical Preservation Office. I don't want you to be under the misimpression that you can comment in 30 days in your capacity as the community board to OTI, and somehow that will separately funnel back to SHPO. So if you want to comment about the historical aspects of it in the section 106 process, you need to do it in that process, which is ongoing. As I said, some of those sites are already SHPO doesn't seem to like, other ones they don't seem to have an issue with, and others are still ongoing. And I can give you the link to the website where I can make sure you guys can make sure you know where to comment on those state historic preservation issues.
Can I just add something about this issue?
Yes, Todd, please go.
So, I think we'd be well advised to do what we have traditionally done, which is make a general statement about this process as it exists. We can certainly draft a resolution saying that we disapprove of, the method and the process for the reasons that we stated in our earlier resolution. But as John says, this is the real world that we live in. We can only do the best we can do. We should comment using the excellent draft matrix that Michael has come up with. To Michael's point about the historical grounds for objecting to some of these, just because we can do it for all of them doesn't mean that we should. That would be inconsistent with, the approach that the Parks Committee has taken. We still have 30 days. I think Libby, what you were getting at, which was to, come up with, take advantage of the time we have, refine the matrix, look at these 9 or 10 sites. Surely, if we consult with our colleagues on the Landmarks Committee, if there are 2 or 3 or 4 of them that really are going to interfere with the look and feel of our historic districts, we should immediately, while we have the time, come out and make our comments about that and send it to the appropriate authorities. I was going to say that as a community board, we don't have the power to deep six this. We have the power to comment on it. The bureaucratic schema is, as Mr. Sakota said, we have to work through the right channels. But, to help focus this, I think what we should do is develop our matrix, use the time that we have, make a general statement that we don't like the process, because there's still nothing that we've heard here that gives all of our stakeholders the right to comment, and then comment as best we can on what's before us.
Great.
Is that something that you would be in favor of, John?
Yeah, that he stated
To
perfectly.
do a general, we don't want it, but we will
Right.
develop this thing
Right.
and then
That is-
continue
yeah.
to, okay. Are there any other sort of like issues, concerns, or benefits that anyone on the committee wants to put into a resolution?
I need exec to be able to write letters under the section 106 framework.
Alarm, it's 9 p.m.
You want the executive committee to be able to write letters under the historic
sec-
preservation?
Under section 1, yeah, I'm not saying they have to go any way. I'm not weighing in on that. I'm just saying that if we're gonna take our time and review it, and that makes sense to me, somebody has to have the opportunity between now and October 31st to actually make a comment, because if we wait, we will not be able to do so.
Okay.
And all 10 of them will go up. Regardless, if we do not
Yes,
comment.
yes, but we
all
need
10 of them will-
as our public entity, we going into this need to have the executive committee be able to write letters. Is that something that this committee is comfortable with? Given everything that we've discussed and given sort of like this rough guideline for how we're talking about it, we're really taking things to be more above board in general in the committee. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about that.
Libby,
don't
I
have a-
just,
Yeah, we don't have a quorum to any of this. I just want to make sure that there's really a public comment period for this.
so I do, is it possible for us to put on our website just so that we're getting ongoing public comment?
Yeah, we've had that up and we have, I believe it's gone out in several of our emails. We have not received comment from the public despite that. We can certainly increase some of our efforts for that. I don't know if we have like a social media account or something.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that the public part is happening, but we'll do what we need. That's fine. Thank you.
I mean, and maybe, no, that goes to a point of maybe we want to have notifications go up and we can go get printed out and we have a team that goes and looks at these specific sites so that we also provide comment on those sites. Is that something that the committee would support as we go forward with the comment on these specific locations in more detail? If we're
Chair,
sort of, I want to make sure that we're conceptually aligned.
If I'm the only
yes,
who
Charles.
would get off my lawn, I will walk away with my tail.
Okay, Charles, you're
Yes,
recognized.
thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something that I forgot to add. I'm very concerned about, like to be added. The NYPD uses a Stingray device that simulates a cell phone tower to trick cell phone users, to gather their information when dealing with protests and other circumstances that they need to gather phone information. And with 4G and 5G, it's meant to. They have a system to try to prevent that, but it doesn't always work. And my concern is with these kiosks being turned into towers, in effect, it will make the NYPD, it will help them use this Stingray device more effectively because they have these towers so close by that when they simulate this fake tower, they can, the towers are right there. You wouldn't know which one is the authentic one and which one isn't. So I'm trying to keep my comment brief. I did look into this, but I'm concerned since we do have protests in Midtown.
I hear your concerns over the privacy element. So what I'm hearing is we want a resolution. Is there anything else for the broad concept? We're going to continue to follow up on these specific locations and have that come through so that we can write a letter about them, which will also go into our resolution saying that that process is happening with the BREF guidelines as outlined by Michael Southworth. Is that something that the committee would be comfortable with being the action item coming out of this very lengthy meeting? Thank you for your patience on a very contentious issue. Is there any other sort of comments that people wanted to add about it or things that people wouldn't be comfortable with? This is, again, to stay within our prior policy of until these concerns get resolved, we don't like them, but we're developing a framework and according to all of these reasons, and then we are going to provide comments specifically on those in addition to what we're doing here. Is that something people would, is that roughly capturing the conversation?
Just with the caveat that I think that we definitely don't want to come across as Luddites. And we want to make sure that, that we make it clear that we're in favor of 5G
and smart,
infrastructure
like
expansion
smart
in general.
city, and
Yes.
yeah, we want the
I
access piece.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we've had a good conversation around that. I think there's a lot to be said. I think it's also, it was helpful for me certainly to hear that there are in fact cell phone companies that will go into the towers, because that was a big concern before, that it was just a box for nothing. And I think that then we can have the comment on that. Are there people who would be willing to join Michael in writing that resolution?
Right, looking.
Looking and commenting on what exists. So providing comment.
Going around with Michael to the 9 or 10 or whatever different locations and commenting on the appropriateness.
Okay, so for the follow-up piece of it. Okay, so I'm looking for two things. One, the groups that are going out in person and commenting. Thank you, love that. Anyone else for making sure that all of those things go into the resolution so that this committee roughly has all of those things so that we have everyone's concerns? Myrna, would you be willing to take that on and maybe jump here?
More than happy to read through what Michael put together. Yeah,
Okay.
and provide comments. Yes.
Yeah, just to make sure that a lot was
I would
captured.
appreciate your comment and criticism.
Yeah,
Seriously.
I think that roughly that is our thing, and because we do not have quorum, I think that that is helpful and it can be discussed further at exec on Tuesday. So seeing that.
I think Todd should also.
Oh yeah, Todd, very much so. Also Todd, I'm recognizing you have raised your hand.
Yeah, just the comments that I made about the anti-monopoly and competitive aspects of having this go forward, along with the anti-Luddite provisions, should be part of this.
Yes, I think that both of those things will definitely also be involved.
No,
And if you
And
if you
also
wanted to
just,
join that group, making sure that everything is captured in that full scope, that would be great.
and as a matter of civil polity that Robert stayed with us this entire time. So
Yeah, no, thank you, Robert, for all of your time. We definitely want all of these things. I think we're a little concerned about
We consider it all what this gal had to say, this lawyer, or with regard to the.
Yeah, I think the hacking stuff will go into it, and I think maybe concerns about outstanding stuff,
There
though.
was something around.
The FCC
court mandated thing that hasn't been followed up with yet.
Also around optical fiber and the city being, I didn't quite understand.
Yeah, I didn't understand some of that stuff too. I'm not sure how the committee feels on that piece of it. We can say that we heard comments on it.
Comment?
Yeah, we can say that we heard
Yeah.
comments on it,
My
but
first rule, whenever you get a call, you have to
Yeah.
do due diligence.
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
organization to
So,
see
yeah.
What their vested interest is in this, because I'm looking at her card here, and it's clear, it appears from her card that her primary interests are health concerns. So, you can have a health concern, but then you can come up with 10 or 12 other reasons why something should or shouldn't happen. It just happened to be aligned with your primary goal, right? So I don't know who funds this organization or what
Yeah.
their mission is. So,
yeah, we can definitely say that we heard
yeah.
from members
So,
of
yeah,
the
you could
public, to
just
the extent
comment on
that
it, but
the public was.
endorsing it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I don't think endorsing it. I think it's more of we heard comment about,
We did mention.
Do you have
the
this?
health,
I think
But,
previously they mentioned the health thing in the prior resolution, but maybe not.
Do you have? did you
I
see
don't
it?
have it, but that would be great.
No,
So I think,
I just gave it to you right there.
You can do
Uh,
text with low latency, whatever. Okay.
and do
Did
I
we
have
have
any other things
on the
for
agenda?
walking around with Michael K back? Okay, I will pester you guys later to do more of the on work, but it sounds like we have a framework for referring this to the executive committee with everything that we've been discussed as our general concerns. It sounds like we are heading in that direction as a no without these concerns. Is that?
Yeah.
And then we later, the parks and the resolution will say that the Parks Committee will then provide comment based on these matrix things. Am I hearing consensus around that? Okay. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
We're not.
We have to refer to say how many people
Oh.
said stuff to the executive committee so that they can then do the formal stuff.
I'll motion. Do I
You
have
want
a
to complete
second?
the thought?
I'll second.
Okay, with all of those things, great. Can I take a vote? Because Michael is not here. John Harris,
Yeah.
Catherine,
Yes.
me, I will go after Mike K back.
Yes.
Isabel Marks,
Yes.
Charles and I,
Yes.
Todd Shapiro,
Yes.
BJ, administrative job, and then Murnall.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your patience on that, Robert. We will, I think maybe probably be in touch in general, but thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for staying and answering additional questions that we understood, and your candor in addressing the contracts and the cellular carriers being part of it. I think that was actually very helpful for us.
No, my pleasure. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us. I did just drop into the chat, Libby, some, oh, somebody said email it to the office. Okay, so I think the consulting party on the section 106 for Manhattan 5 is Marissa Mack.
Yes.
She has all of that, but again, she should be, I think, been getting the emails about that process and how you comment in it, but I will email this to her as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time, and thank you for bearing with us through the technological, bringing everybody kind of up to speed with it.
My pleasure. If you have any other questions, please reach out. I'm happy to talk again or talk separately or answer any emails that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Okay. And so our second agenda item is running sort of quickly through some of the my goal of having parks meetings be very, very quick is slipping away. But if we can run through some of our park stuff, the proposals, as you guys saw, for the events in Madison Square Park, we've got the 3 that they are doing for the rest of the year. That is their total, reaching their total of 4 fundraising events for the year. This is all part of them. I believe that they are here to present, to run through those very quickly.
One is going to be this coming weekend, so we will not do a resolution on that.
What is
because
gonna
that
be the when?
this coming weekend. So we're not gonna do a resolution on that, but we can provide comment, though we would like to hear. Again, once again, we would like to hear these proposals before, this point in time.
Made them
But
wait.
yeah. And then, but there are those, so I don't know if Madison Square Park is here for that.
All the see is Bryant Park.
Okay, I don't know, BJ was gonna present on one of them. Isabel, would you be able to present on yours?
Yes, happy to. Okay, so I'm presenting on the Porcelanosa application. So just quick overview of that. They're depicting like a small cottage containing a holiday themed photo booth and free hot chocolate for the public. That is going to be on the western gravel area in Madison Square Park. They're estimating they're going to have 200 to 500 people spread out across the day. There will be 8 people, for reference, spread out across the day, making that assumption because the event runs from morning to evening. There will be 8 people working the event. And they have had this event before. They had it in 2023. So this is a holiday promotional event. There's going to be like a festive photo opportunity. There's going to be a donation made to the Madison Square Park Conservancy. And the opening day in particular is going to include holiday carolers and a free DIY ornament station. So they have notified and received support from the Partnership and Conservancy. Porcelanosa is a corporate sponsor. It doesn't look like we have, we do. The signage is pretty minimal. It sort of just says Porcelanosa on the outside, encouraging people to, I assume, visit the store near the park. They anticipate that the only sanitation impact might be some small paper cups. They're expecting Porcelanosa staff to kind of do those litter pickups, because they will have sanitation team members on staff during the event, and the sound is going to be a fairly small portable speaker that does not really go beyond the like sort of bounds of the event.
Great. Does
Make a
any
motion to approve.
okay. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any comments?
Yes.
Yes, Charles.
I was gonna say, I've been to a similar event before and they do it really well. I went to their tree lighting and it's similar with caroling and hot chocolate, and they do it well. So they know what they're doing. I think we should definitely approve.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Okay. Harris,
Yes.
Ellington,
Yes.
Payback.
Yes.
Marks,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Shapiro,
Yes.
Southworth,
Yes.
Sung,
It's gone, I think.
Vikram.
Yes.
Okay. Great. The other event is going to be, BJ was going to present on this. It is, let me pull this up quickly. Sorry, folks. It is the ghost. It is a ghost promotion where it's going to be a gingerbread house and there's going to be like a ghost on it and they're going to like reveal it.
Madison Square Park.
Madison Square Park, same thing. Generally, the setup dates, I'm trying to pull up the details here.
Raises money for the park.
It all raises money for the park. It all does the stuff that it always does. How does the committee feel about that?
Positively. Raises money for the park.
It raises money for the park.
And they're gonna have 4 events?
They've managed to get the full 4. In prior years, they haven't been able to get the full 4. So this one is going to begin, the date of the event is October 30th, which is a day we've heard a lot about tonight. Setup is going to start at in the middle of the night, and then the event goes through November 2nd. And that's when the cleanup time will end. It's a cottage-like structure, and it's going to be veiled with a sheet, and it's going to look like a ghost. And then on the 31st, it's going to be like, now it's Christmas Eve, like holiday stuff. They expect 500 people per day. And it's a substantial donation, and it's within our general footprint and beliefs. They're going to collect all of stuff. It's pretty like low volume, and there are no giveaways. It is just a like photo opportunity.
Motion?
Any comments or any questions?
Is it gonna be scary?
I think it's going to be it's sort of one of those horror comedies. So it's like it's a happy scary.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it's a happy scary. That is my understanding of it. Any other questions?
Comment, I think it's a good
Comments?
idea.
Okay.
Good idea.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Harris,
Yeah.
Ellington,
Yes.
Kayback,
Yes.
Marks,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Shapiro,
Yes.
Southworth,
Yes.
and Vikram.
Yes.
Great. Okay, and there's gonna be one more of those, and it is taking place this weekend and is similar to all of it, but there was nothing that was particularly outstanding about it, but we can just do a brief that will then get referred as an update to exec. I would like to recognize Maddie Baker from Bryant Park to briefly present on the holiday market. Sorry for keeping you this late. Thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. I will share my screen if that's okay.
Madison Square Park.
Bryant Park.
Oops, let me go to the beginning. Okay, just wanted to present to you all some things that are changing this season, which are probably definitely fewer than we've ever changed in the past. It's almost exactly the same as last season. The rink shops and lodge will open on October 25th, the Friday before Halloween, same as always. The shops will close and begin to load out on Sunday, January 5th, and then the rink and lodge close for the season on Sunday, March 2nd. Here's this year's map. One thing that we are changing is that we're adding additional decking in order to relieve crowding and congestion and increase accessibility. At the bottom area is where our restroom trailer that we've done the past few seasons is, and this year we're adding access from the north side of that deck. I'll talk a little bit more about the trailer later. We were hoping to add some more ADA access there, which isn't happening this year, but will be happening next year. Small Business Spotlight Kiosk is Bank of America's kiosk that provides 4 minority-owned small businesses from the 5 boroughs 3 rent-free weeks in the holiday shops. Last year, they did a marketplace by Seneca Women, which is returning for a second year because it was so successful. The bathroom trailer is going to be the same as in years prior, in the same location. We did purchase an ADA accessible restroom that unfortunately isn't going to arrive in time, but will be there for future seasons. So we're excited for that. And then free events in the park, same as usual. We'll do our trick or treat, caroling, our tree lighting, and Santa's Corner. And other events, skating to themes music, Kids Week. One thing we're adding is that in January and February, we're going to be adding free programming in the Overlook. We have programs already confirmed, such as our Mahjong socials, which take place in the summer, will be taking place up in the Overlook. We'll have some game socials that we have in the summer taking place in the Overlook, and we're currently working on expanding that to be able to use. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, good question. So that's this top right photo. It overlooks the rink. So it's on top of the rink entrance and exit. And it's just a really beautiful, usually it's just used as an event space, as a rental space, but we wanted to have more free programming up there when it's not being used as a rental space for people to be able to enjoy, because it offers some very beautiful views. We will also have Lunar New Year again this year, our skating showcases, music at the lodge, and various photo opportunities. And that's all.
Can you go back to that map again?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm seeing on this map that I'm going to describe for folks who may be unable to see it is that it looks like there is still that the market stalls are up on, I guess, 40th Street, which I think
Yeah.
we commented on last year, and that we'd had some concerns about overcrowding and that we had gotten some comments about it. I know Michael Kabak has been there a lot. I was wondering if you could speak more to that and if there have been any other mitigating features to prevent the overcrowding, and if it's smaller maybe this year, or there's a different area for trash or bike racks or dumpsters or all of that stuff and
Yep.
parking.
Thank
And
you.
keep moving.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. We do have fewer kiosks on 40th Street. We did hear people's concerns in the past. We did feel like it was successful last year in bringing people out. If you notice, I'm sorry, it's so hard to see. There are 4 kiosks on the east and 4 kiosks on the west with a very large empty space in between. That's because we were trying to draw people out of the park, and we'll have additional seating. If you'd like to see a photo of what that looked like last year, I can pull one up.
Yeah, if you can pull up a photo of that, that would be
definitely. I can do that.
There's a gray box on the screen. I'm not entirely sure.
Oh,
if that is on all of
hold
our
on. Let me
screens
do
or
a
an
stop
image.
share and then reshare with the photo.
I think it's blocking some of the blueprint for us.
Got it. Okay.
many-
While I'm pulling this up, I'll add. Sorry.
How many? I
So-
was wondering how many stalls are there compared to last year? Just as,
Yeah,
as the
so-
number of and what the type of vendors are, because that was also a concern last year.
Yep. So we have food vendors there this year, which we did not have last year. And we also have some other like art sales vendors. This year we have 8 vendors. Last year, I believe we had 10. It might have been more than 10 last year, but it was at least 10.
Okay, so fewer.
Fewer this year. Let me pull up this photo. Okay. And one other thing to add is that we are getting Metro Store containers for our waste, which we're excited about, and they should be here in November. Oh, I see why there's, is the gray box gone?
The gray box is gone. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so for those at home, if you could describe a little bit more of what we're
Yeah.
looking at, the
So
platform
this, yep, this is a platform that's raised off of the sidewalk and goes a little bit into the roadbed. This is an example of the seating area. Last year it was much smaller. This is a photo of last year. This year it will be much bigger. The point of this area is to bring people out of the park, though people won't be drawn out of the park without some sort of amenity. We wanted to do something bigger in the past. We ended up with this, so that's why we have the kiosks there to kind of draw people out. We have some of one of our more popular food kiosks with a second kiosk there to kind of lure some people into a less crowded area.
Okay.
Dumpsters.
Oh yeah, the dumpsters.
Yeah.
We've got questions about dumpsters and where they're gonna go, because I believe that there were some issues with the dumpsters on that 40th Street last year as well.
Yeah, hopefully I can address the issues you're referring to. I'm not sure if I know exactly which ones, because our trash was in the same area that it is all year round. Some of the trash, there were dumpsters for commercial waste. Because we manage the lodge, that waste does not get picked up by DSNY. We have it carted privately, but it takes up part of the same footprint that we use for our public waste all year round. And then for our public waste, we're getting Metro Store bins through the Clean Curbs program that the city is doing with all business improvement districts. So there should be no more bags on the ground starting in November is what we're hoping. That's the date we've been given by Metro Store for their arrival.
Okay. I think that there'd been, maybe it was taking up some parking spaces, or there's additional storage on 40th Street. Is that what your question was about? Do you have a different question?
There's no parking space on 40th Street
Okay.
on the north side.
Okay.
Possible.
Okay. Did that answer your questions about
Yeah.
the dumpsters? Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be the same.
There is a container that we've used for storage in the past on 40th Street that we've removed from 40th Street and will not be returning for the entirety of Winter Village. So there will be additional curb space on 40th Street this year.
Okay, great. I think that,
Right.
and we'll
you're-
see if that'll
and
address.
you are aware that there are guys with selling stuff who aren't in league with you guys, who just come and plant themselves on the corner, usually on Sixth Avenue, right by the subway entrance, to narrow the. Maybe you could do something about pulling them away from the corner, away
Yeah.
from the subway entrance there, that narrows the funnels of people all over themselves.
Yeah, are you referring to the food vendors?
The guy with the movable cart who
Yeah.
comes every, that sells
Yeah.
coffee,
We've
nachos.
We've been working on that. That's definitely an issue we care a lot about. And we've been experimenting with trying to get some movement there to different locations if removal can't be an option. But I hear your concern. That's a concern that we have as well.
One of the suggestions that you might offer these guys is to go on Sixth Avenue. I'll probably get a ticket there, but the sidewalk is wider on Sixth Avenue than it is
Yeah.
on Fourth.
Yeah, I'll definitely relay that suggestion.
Any other questions for the committee? Charles, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, do you guys publish on the website a list of the different vendors so people might be able to get a sense of what there is to navigate the market a little easier? Maybe they want to go to certain stores before others. And I was wondering if there'll be any assistance for people who are blind or visually impaired to have someone guide them if they get to the market, like a meeting place, maybe they can be guided. Because I went one year, but unfortunately the assistant wasn't able to help me look out for my ride back home. So I'm hoping that there might be improvements there or something like that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Your first question was about the kiosks. There is a list, and we also have maps that show where all of the kiosks are, so that people can map out their visit. As far as supporting folks who are visually impaired, I think that that's a really great idea. It's not something that we have built infrastructurally, but we do have a lot of staff on hand. We call them winter associates that work in our info kiosks that can definitely provide assistance to the best of their ability. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily trained in that regard, though.
Todd, you're recognized.
Hi. So again, I commend your efforts, your holiday efforts every year. It's really turned the park into a magnet and a great place for everybody to gather together. I offer these comments in a constructive way, and maybe you can give me some insight into how some of the things you mentioned tonight have changed things for the better. But I've actually been to your holiday efforts over the years. Last year, it was so popular. I went with my wife and my son and his girlfriend, and the crowds in the Holiday Village were just crushing, as you described. So, the things you mentioned, do you feel that that's really going to make a difference in terms of opening up? Because I remember quite distinctly when I was there last year, I was trying to just make my way onto 40th Street. And this was, peak holiday season. And I was thinking to myself, maybe get rid of one or two of the kiosks, or at least move them apart so you could actually, get access to the street. I mean, cumulatively, do you see that as a problem? And
yeah, we definitely see that as a problem, and we're trying our best to mitigate it. We did see a positive change with the 40th Street kiosks bringing people out onto 40th Street. Another thing we're changing this year, which I unfortunately don't have a photo of yet because it's being created, is increasing our wayfinding. So we'll have arrows that kind of point people in the right direction for restrooms and things so that it's easier to find their way. I think a lot of the congestion often comes from people looking for the rink entrance or the restroom and not knowing where they're going and kind of clogging things up. So Obviously, that's a small part of it, but we're trying to mitigate it in every little way that we can.
What I would suggest is if you can, have your staff and your team monitor that situation very closely. And if you see that your efforts, haven't mitigated those tremendous crowds, see if you could limit them or, come up with another strategy on the run so that people don't get crushed. My poor wife, she's only 4'8", and she literally was becoming claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
I hope for the best and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got some concerns about the congestion and some concerns that are going to be a little bit allayed from that. Are there any other questions from the committee?
I have a comment.
Comment?
When you're ready.
Yes.
I've been going to this thing, living down the block for 35 years now. So as long as it's been, I've been going to it. Each year it gets a little more crowded, a little more messy. Todd, you're not getting any younger. Your wife's not getting any younger. You have to deal with this stuff. Forget about it. Walk sideways, go late at night, go early in the morning. It's not that bad at those times. But hats off to all the money that they can make so that they can keep the wonderful things that they do for the neighborhood is unbelievable, and hats off.
Okay. Thank you, Michael Kabak. Does anybody else have any other comments from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Can we take this to a referral, like business discussion, and how do we feel about any comments, resolution?
I recommend approving all the things that they want to do.
Okay.
Second.
With maybe adding in some language about our concerns about congestion, but we're happy that it's successful and that they've made changes from last year to accommodate our needs. Right? Does that sound good to everybody?
Sounds good.
Great, cool. Harris.
Yes.
Ellington.
Yes.
Kabak.
Yes.
Marks has a drop. Nye.
Yes.
Shapiro.
Yes.
Southworth. That looks like a yes, but you're on mute.
It helps if you turn your microphone.
Yes.
And Vikram.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. That is one more. No, we are done because Madison Square Park. Yeah, no, I still got us out of here in the same amount of time, guys. But so if there's any new business.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, seeing none. I thank you so much. New business.
I have a
new
tour
business
of Madison Square Park. Madison Square Flatiron District Tour on Sunday the 6th. Sunday the 6th. Is that next week? Yeah, Sunday the 6th.
Great.
11 o'clock, free Michael Southworth at the tip of the Flatiron Building. Come, you'll learn about it.
So we've got a tour on Sunday if people would like to come. Thank you. And with that, the September 30th meeting of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee is adjourned.
Yay.
Thank you everyone for coming.
So I'm gonna go and look at those 10, 8, whatever locations.
Yes, after and we're gonna write the resolution for